Fantastic. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are in the world.
That's my line.
I know. No, that's my line. And welcome to another episode of Endurance Chat. I'm Michael Zalavari, and tonight I have a very special guest with us, back returning to Endurance Chat after a little while. It's my pleasure to welcome back after a few years, the voice of the WEC in the Asian Le Mans series and the editor of Daily Sportscars, Mr. Graham Goodwin. Welcome back,
Hi,
Graham.
Michael. It's a delight. You catch me in what is not a shed. This is GGHQ around me, looking, as I can see what you can't, ridiculously untidy after a kind of long period on the road with not a lot in between. It's been one hell of an end to 2020, but now I finally get to sit down and tidy.
Tidy, yeah. Finally get time,
Tidy.
right?
So apologies for the creaky chair, by the way.
Oh, that's fine. I see you've got a new mic set up. Is this the debut of the new mic?
It's not quite,
Okay.
and it's not quite done yet. You'll start, I hope, here slightly better sound quality for Twist Weekend Sportscars. So there's more to actually happen in this space with a bit more sound deadening, so a little bit echoey still. But lots of good stuff planned coming forward on the podcasty front. You know, we've passed a couple of cracking milestones, and there's more to come. I mean, Marshall closing in on his 1,000th podcast.
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
We're chatting the other day about what the number 1,000 might be, and he's got a cracker lined up, I think.
But I'm excited.
Always something. It's a joy in my week to do those things. And obviously, you know, he and to a lesser extent, I have had our domestic challenges in making that a regular day. Delighted to hear some real positivity from Marshall's home front about Chabral and her continued work to recovery. But it's never got in the way of the fact that we just have fun doing that thing. And I know the kind of response we get from you and your guys and from people around the world is enormous. And I think you've probably read past 2 million downloads last
awesome.
week.
Yeah,
Now, bear in mind, that's with far fewer podcasts. We've not done Inside the Sports Car Paddock this year, for the most part. Why? Because we can't go in the garages. We can't actually meet people. So you can expect a pretty dramatic ramping up of that as things start to get back to normal at some point in the next 40 or 50 years.
Yeah, at some point, right? Yeah. I mean, it feels like it feels like a lifetime ago that I was at the Bend talking working with you at the Asian Le Mans series, and that was just this year. This year is
it's ridiculous.
It has been absolutely ridiculous. Like how do you sum up this year in terms of motorsport after that? And we were getting the first little inklings that something might be wrong, because I remember the Chinese teams elected not to come because of that happening.
Absolutely right. So it was like nothing any of us have seen before. To give you a bit of context, I think we may have talked about my previous professional existence at various points, and one of the things I used to do with UK government was communications planning for disaster. That could be anything from counter-terrorism through to pandemic. And I can tell you, I mean, okay, that was before the era of social media, et cetera, so there's not quite as many touchstones as there might be now. But what we're dealing with on a global platform now is to the upper end of anything we ever thought we'd have to plan for. So, it was very dramatic. We were out in Asia for the final two rounds in Sepang and Thailand. I was out there for most of that period of time with Trudy, my good lady, Mrs. DSC Editor, the sainted one. And we got back just days before real drama in Europe. It was already very much a live issue across in Asia. It was interesting to see the level of intervention and preparedness we saw in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Thailand, compared to, frankly, the shit show we actually had in the UK. I think we went through 12, 13, 14 airports in 3 weeks. The only airport I didn't have my temperature taken, and by the way, this included Buriram Airport, which is in Buttville nowhere in Thailand. No offense to Thailand, lovely place. The only place we didn't have our temperature taken was London.
Ah, well, that must have been reassuring coming back home.
Yeah, well, and even more reassuring coming back from Bahrain, which, by the way, has been my first long haul flight since. Didn't have it taken this time either.
Oh.
So it's, we'll just load up that shotgun and shoot ourselves in that foot, then reload it and shoot in the other one.
Oh, no.
But I mean, what the effect has been profound.
Absolutely.
Almost all of it bad. I think there have been some aspects of it that have been a bit of triumph for the human spirit. I think when we get to the kind of community that we've had around Daily Sportscar, the community that you guys have got, they've been universally positive part of the mix in that it's drawn people to interact in a way which, a more regular way, because obviously people have had more time. But it's been a massive economic challenge for the whole industry. I mean, my income focuses principally around work that I and my team do at racetracks. If you can't go to racetracks, there's no income. The race teams, I'm frankly in awe, staggered at how many of them have managed to get through this and out the other side. Frankly, I think it shows that we're dealing with a mature industry. We're dealing with a mature group of business people that shows that they do have some contingency. It's not doing what a lot of people have to do and living paycheck to paycheck. They've managed to survive that. And a lot of the tone that you'll probably hear in some of my answers coming forward here, and certainly in terms of some of the stories that are doing the rounds at the moment, is I think that needs to be recognised, it needs to be valued, it needs to be accommodated. And we need to give people a bit of space. I've never been a fan of the kind of, oh, this is awful, the sky's falling, the sky's falling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a helpful thing right now. Everything right now is more difficult than it ever has been in my lifetime doing this. And, listen to this week's podcast. I do unload, I'm afraid, on a press room colleague for the tone of some of the stuff we saw coming out of Bahrain. Uncalled for, unnecessary, and selfish, to be honest with you. From my point of view, will bad things happen coming forward? Absolutely. We are going to lose some people from this industry. We're going to lose some programs from this industry. Some of those programs are going to be significant. We've lost some already. But we've got to be collaborative to keep people in this industry. There is nothing in it for me to blow out the water something which has not yet been finally decided yet. And I'm not a fan of people doing that. But we can get on and talk about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we started off on a great note. Started off on a really positive note.
But the positive note is back racing.
Yeah.
For the most part, we've seen maybe a 10, 20% drop off in the kind of numbers. It's been worse than that for some. It's been better than that for others. It's generally been better when those championships have got everything packed away into containers anyway.
Yeah.
There was, I thought, a spectacularly honest and open example of the impact, and your listeners and viewers can see this. It was a press conference that got a lot of criticism because it went on quite a long while.
Yeah.
But go back and have a look at GT World on YouTube. Have a look at Stefan Rattel's press conference from Spa. And take a look at his opening slide, which talked about the impact on SRO and their global platforms, just exactly what the COVID impact has been. I thought that was a remarkable level of honesty from a mature commercial organisation to show in real terms what the impact has been. And it's horrifying. Look
absolutely.
at, one of the things closest to my heart, British GT, which is where I first started. They've done a great job of drawing together a grid from where they can, encouraging people to come and do one-off races, etc., etc. But if you deconstruct that and look at what was left from where they were supposed to start, it's pretty horrifying. They lost 40% of their grid. GT4 European Series lost 50% of their grid. Other championships, I know we're going to talk about GT World Challenge Asia. Just didn't happen.
Yeah, same with Australian GT this year. Didn't happen, even though Australia, by and large, has done quite well with a lot of things, and a part of that has been the transparency from our health departments and all that sort of stuff, and doing a lot of work to get it under control. But even then, Australian GT just didn't run a lot of the support categories for supercars and for the Australian Racing Group organized championships didn't run, and it was because I think Australia particularly has a added difficulty of logistics because it's a big country. It's basically trying to do a European sized championship with much less resources for it. So yeah, it has been certainly a trying time for motorsport fans around the world. But you were a part of something that helped bring a lot of people together with the Facebook support group, the World Under Safety Car. Just tell us a bit about how that came together and what use people got out of that, because I saw a lot of people actually finding a way to get through this period through that group.
Well, I think I'm not going to take any credit for that at all. That goes down to Jackie Warnock, fellow Aussie, and
fellow Adelaidean, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
And a lady, Adelaidean. So before we get to that point, there was already a kind of a conversation with various broadly like-minded people. I had a moment sitting in this chair in this office looking at that screen, and it was as it all started to fall apart. Quite a depressing time if you care about these things and these people, and if this is your livelihood. And I can remember that moment and walking up to the house, which is about 40 steps that way, to Trudy standing in the kitchen with Husky, because he's always in the kitchen if you're in the kitchen, because there's a possibility of a banana, and lots of bananas, and saying to her, we can't keep doing this, that literally everything we were writing was doom and gloom and disaster. I was beginning at that point to start to get notes from people I knew and some people I didn't, so emails and messages saying, do you know if anything else is going on? What can you tell us? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's an information vacuum, if you like. And there was a point then, I can recall, picking up the phone to Stephen Kilby and saying, I think we've got to make a change right now. I think we've got to make a change because I'm not doing great with this. I sense that a lot of other people aren't doing great with this. All the news is terrible. It is not going to get any better for some considerable time. And at that stage, we didn't know whether that was going to be weeks, months, years. We didn't. And we got to start to look after ourselves and look after the people in the business. And this is where that kind of started. And you might remember, Michael, that led to a brief editorial from me saying, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We started a round robin of asking people to come to us with brief pen pictures and other skills they had to try to get them some work, because obviously there's a vast proportion of people working in motorsports, as I am, freelancers. We started shifting from, we didn't start to shift, we made a paradigm shift from news to feature material through that 4 or 5 month period, and I'm still sitting here with dozens of those ready to go. There's one yesterday, the Corvette C6R.
Yeah, that was really, really fun.
That was done through that period, and then from there on in, talking to people I know and care about, which includes you, and we've had conversations through that period to just make sure people are okay, and that led to Jackie and others coming forward with the World Under Safety Car, which was basically intended to be an opportunity to bring resources together to help people professionally, to help people with their well-being and their mental health, because this is not a natural situation for any of us.
Not at all.
Some of us are a lot luckier than others. I mean, I'm dead lucky. Around us is relatively green. We have a great big slavering beast of a dog that likes to be walked. That was an amazing part of this, is that gave us the opportunity to go. We've got a great country park 5 minutes walk away where we could go and lose ourselves in, for an hour. But we're lucky.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who aren't that lucky. There's a lot of people, if you're sitting there in a 1-bedroom flat or whatever, and cut off from your social circle from anything other than Zoom or Skype or whatever, it's quite difficult. It's difficult, particularly I think for younger people. We've certainly found that with our family, and that caused some issues on the family front for us too, like it has for millions, billions of other people around the planet. So the World and the Safety Car, the idea behind it was that it would give people an opportunity to just share information, to support. And what I do know that's happened from that, I'm sure you've seen this with your friends and family, which is you can sense through electronic communications a tone.
Yeah.
There's something about the words or structure. And I think I'd love to see a T-shirt spread across the planet that basically says, "Are you doing okay, mate?"
Yeah. And
because that's really important moving forward.
Yeah, and it's been amazing to see that sort of support, not just in that context, but in our own context as well with our community, the weekly rewatches that we were doing, the Discord chat, which has been by far the more popular than it's been at any other point in its history, just because we have this sort of togetherness and this common interest and then we're using that to lean on each other to get through. So that was something
humanity. It's basic humanity reinvented electronically, and it's what. We've had the conversation before, I'm sure we'll have it again, about how important communication is. Communication is absolutely vital. Without that, people do feel isolated.
Yeah, isolated.
And and that's so important right now. And I think when people have said to me, "Yeah, you would say that. You do this for a living, blah 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 blah." Now people are beginning to get it.
Yeah.
Now people begin to get to the point where you start to see what happens when communication goes well and communication goes badly. And, people are beginning to be, I think, a lot more selective about the way they consume information and contact. I mean, I look at times at some of the social media channels and it's just downright depressing. It's
absolutely
divisive and hate-filled and awful. And I also look at the way that some of the organizations that we interact with and do business with communicate well and communicate not so well, or in some case badly, and in some cases not at all. And I think that's been a bit of a wake-up call, and that is going to be something you'll be hearing and seeing a lot more from me about in the future, which is actually, guys, you've got to do a better job here. You've got to make sure that we don't turn up in a situation, in a race meeting where we can't get into the same room together as easily as we could, and you can't expect information, really important information, to spread by osmosis. You've got to communicate. You've got to interact. You've got to value those people.
We'll put a pin in that because that's something I do want to talk about a little later on. But let's keep a train on this a little bit of a positive mood. Let's have a think. 2020. It's been a rough year for a lot of people. But what do you reckon has been the most enjoyable event for you for this year, for 2020, in terms of motor racing? What comes to mind? Because there's been a lot of difficult ones. There's been a lot of interesting ones, and a few very new ones.
It's an interesting one, and there's lots of different answers for lots of different reasons. I mean, my core friendship group is around racing because that's what I spend my free time doing and all my elective time doing. It's been great to do some road trips. I wish we'd been able to do it with more people, but I've done 5 long distance road trips with David Lord. He's my business partner on Daily Sportscar. We've been to all of the ELMS races. We flew to 1. We drove to the other 4. The same with Pedro DSC. Absolutely, both photographers. Which of course does make them a slightly lower form of life. You have to remember that. Okay. And if you're listening to this, Andrew Hall across in Australia.
I'll make sure to clip that out and send that to him.
Bless him.
I got to meet Andrew at the Bend and at Bathurst.
Skippy Hall, just the most awesome person. Absolutely lost in operation. I joke. I thoroughly enjoyed the working in the team aspect at Le Mans, it was weird.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed working with that team. I thought we had a great team on the broadcast team there. ELMS, I think those race meetings in the press room were pretty good. I think it's helped to draw together some people that probably didn't talk as much as they should in the press room and in the paddock.
Okay.
So I've enjoyed those thoroughly. The best race meeting.
Or the best event. Because remember, Le Mans Virtual was a thing.
Wasn't really involved in it.
Oh, you weren't? Okay.
No. I didn't get involved directly in that. Happy to talk about it. I think it was an absolute triumph for the people that put that together. I think it was a head turner. I think it got people to understand what you could do with resource. It got people to understand what step change you could make when resource went from that to that.
Yeah.
It particularly got people to understand what value proper TV production can bring. For me, the real positive from that race meeting was that I thought they chose their cutout interviews well. I thought they did a great job of doing so many of them. I thought they had a lot of very good people involved in that. I think Martin Haven and Ben Constanturis did a great job holding that together. I think Lou, and Haley did a great job with what was going on in the fringes of that with the add-in interviews. But I know that Gerard Deveau was very, very proud of it. I think he's got very good reason to be proud of it. And I believe the ACO learned some lessons there, which I hope they remember. And the final thing to say, and I'm anticipating a massive grin here, is it did lead to a permanent change for the WEC. And
yes.
You know what that permanent change was?
Yes.
Which is they now use Discord.
Yes, which is hilarious.
Which I still don't understand.
Yes, we would be doing this in Discord. I've had to spend 2 hours piping the sound and video from this into Discord, so that way the rest of the community can be involved as well.
Here comes the other question. The other question you haven't asked.
Yeah.
By the way, this is a terrible habit of mine saying this is the question you could have asked.
Yeah, well, it might be on my list.
It might. Which is, do I think things have fundamentally changed between actual and virtual racing?
That's literally the next question I was about to ask you. Come on, Graham.
Bingo. So the answer is, it's a yes and no.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly, you're going to see people that are now involved in virtual racing that otherwise wouldn't have been, and vice versa. I think people have been exposed to proper professional race teams for the first time. Do I think that's going to mean a fundamental shift? Do I think we're going to see a continuation of the level at which virtual racing was seen through lockdown? No, I don't.
No.
But I do think it's raised it a few levels. I think
Do you think we can see a virtual racing, a sim racing platform alongside maybe not directly alongside, but do you think in the future, if they do another Le Mans virtual or a WEC virtual series, a sim racing series, that we can start to see that be taken maybe not as seriously, but seriously enough to be legitimized in the next 5 years because of what's happened this year?
I think the key is going to be this. It's going to be affordability.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, a lot of these organisations are struggling to get things together. If they can see there's commercial potential for it, absolutely. Remember, the only thing. So there's two things that have changed. One is the profile that those events have been given at a point where there's been nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is the explosion in terms of the numbers of it. I mean, I've lost count of the number of organisations that have been on the phone to me through that period saying, we're thinking of doing something to do with virtual racing. And some of those happened and some of them didn't. So in terms of the explosion, that's not sustainable. Not all of those will survive. In terms of the profile, some of those events were already happening, but didn't have the profile outside of quite a closed community. So I think the reality is, where they happen, the inevitability is they're going to take a step. Whether or not they take a step or a huge step, I think is going to depend on the sustainability of the audience. One thing I've certainly noticed, watching some of the streamed races on YouTube and with the chat up, is always, how can I put this? an education.
Yeah, I was about to say, because you would that would be a new experience for you. You would have never had to have been in a chat room during a live race like that.
No, not quite true. So,
Not quite?
I mean, as a for instance, the last couple of years for ELMS, I've often had the stream up in the corner with the chat.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So so I can see what's going on there. Aside from the fact that I can only really say that I sincerely hope that if COVID was a righteous force, there are a number of people within those chats that really, really should. The word "cull."
We've got Ollie Trovis in our chat saying it was an uneducation being in those chat rooms.
I have to say, I'm being cruel and I'm being ironic, but holy shit, the intelligent quotient there. But the reason I raise it before we get into that is very, very, very clearly a very high proportion of people on those chats have come to racing from gaming.
Yeah.
And that cannot be ignored and cannot be underestimated in being a potential force for good in growing a sport where the interest has been static for too long. Okay. It absolutely gives you the opportunity to bring in a much, much younger audience, and you've got to find ways to engage with that. And that means you've got to look at doing that in very, very different ways.
Yeah.
Absolute interactivity is the key to it. I think championships are missing a major trick by not having significant personalities involved in that championship, getting themselves involved live in those chats.
Yeah. Oh, live in those chats, not in those sim racing events.
Well, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I know that on the odd occasion when I'll drop in and say, no, it's not that, it's this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's 2 or 3 people that know who I am going, oh, and then it follows on. There's no doubt in my mind. Let's say, for instance, it was IMSA.
Yep.
Okay, so let's say IMSA did that. Now, okay, they don't have a YouTube channel, blah, blah, blah. But let's say, for the sake of arguing, they did. And let's say you put in somebody who's not active, but is, well, a good example might be Ollie Gavin.
Yep.
So let's say Ollie Gavin dives in to the chat and says, hi, guys, hope you enjoyed the race. That then leads to interaction with someone that has access to something that very many of those people don't have, which are facts. So it is that kind of, quite aside from that experiential, well, what's that like? Which is always a great part of actually having someone on comms like Alan McNish, 100%. That's it. So he can tell you what is happening rather than me joining the dots. Yeah, or making it up.
Yeah.
But I think that's something which would be highly valued. That if actually you could get somebody who's not directly involved in that event, just to go in there and give them half an hour or 45 minutes, join the race to interact and to educate. And I think that could be very, very cool. And I can tell you this, that is on a extensive set of notes that I prepared for more than one championship moving forward to 2021.
Ooh, that's very, very exciting. I do want to talk a bit more about possible additions to broadcasts and changes with some of my own ideas a little later on. But we'll just wrap around to Le Mans Virtual because I know Ollie had another question that he wanted to ask, and that was regarding OEM interest and buy-in to sim racing, because we saw in the Le Mans Virtual, we saw Ferrari drivers, we saw Charles Leclerc, we saw Lando Norris jump in as well. We saw teams from Rebellion and Bicolors jump in and do well. We saw Porsche be very, very forward with their commitment to that race. Does that do you see, in your experience, a situation wherein there's more manufacturer buy into these events and also more series buy into the events? Like, could we see a WEC download pack for IMSA, for iRacing, or for R Factor 2, where they have the Orica P207, the Dallara P217, a Toyota LMP1 car, Bicolors LMP1 car, Rebellion LMP1 car, and you can start to simulate a full season like that?
I hope so. I mean, we've seen already. I mean, I'm not a serious gamer. I play with one game and only one game.
And what's that?
Tends to be Well, it tends to be my downtime. Sorry about the creaky chair. And it's on my phone. I play
nice.
Racing 3. So I do, and I've been playing it for what feels like years. Don't spend any money doing it at all. Never have. But IMSA have engaged with that. Formula E have engaged with that. Formula One have now engaged with that. To the detriment of the game, I should say. But
well, I mean, that's what happens when you get Codemasters to develop a game for you. I mean, this has been like that for 20... Sorry. Anyway, continue.
but could they, should they, would they? Yes. I'll say this out loud quickly before I move on, which is I don't want to give manufacturers any excuse not to invest in real cars.
Yeah, okay.
There's that. I think we've got to be quite careful there that what is cool, there's no doubt it's cool to be able to open up a gaming platform and that's the car I want to race. Okay, I mean, and it's been going on for a long time. I can remember walking into a hotel lobby for Paul Ricard, must be 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm trying to remember what it might have been Forza.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
Forza was super big around then.
And they had a variety of GT cars, and we spent a very happy half an hour going through the garage of cars that you could actually select on that game platform, beer in hand, looking which ones have Daily Sportscar stickers on them.
Oh, nice.
So, so there's all of that kind of goes on. So the straight answer is it is cool, but I think the answer here is both sides of this transaction need to be aware that there are costs involved.
So do you think in that case it would be better for the OEMs themselves to buy in, or better for the series to buy in and create something that then promotes the series more than just a manufacturer? So if you say, IMSA, give us your DPI cars and your liveries and put them in, is that something that sounds like a better prospect than going to Nissan and say, give me your DPI car that doesn't exist anymore?
For me, by far, the most sensible transaction would be to do it with the series and the championship, because then what you're doing is you're promoting awareness of a product, and you're promoting awareness of that broader community thing, which basically then means that people value and are curious about and then research and then hopefully follow that platform. Yeah. So, and this goes all the way back. I mean, all the way back. I mean, talking to people who've been involved in this for a long time, the original kind of Gran Turismo, interest in Super GT. Yeah, interest in Super GT came from gaming, without a shadow of a doubt. The explosion of interest in
the Nordschleifer
Subarus. Yeah, well, absolutely. It's an area where unless you're, an uber geek like some of us are, the reality is trying to get access to real-time information or even reasonable time information about those kind of racing platforms was next to impossible. There just wasn't information there. There wasn't live TV. There wasn't blah, 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 blah. I mean, you look at what's happened in the last decade or so. I mean, the Nürburgring 24 Hours, we covered it right from the beginning of Daily Sportscar back in 2002, 2003. But it was half a decade later before Radio Show Limited brought us with a crew to cover that race live, which was the first time it had ever had any kind of English language live coverage. We've talked before, I know, about the UK motorsport audience's relationship with the Bathurst 1000. And if you've not heard the story before, that used to get prime time Saturday coverage of the Bathurst 1000, but months after the race. That they had that brilliantly done, extraordinary coverage with camera angles no one else had, the follow cams, the in-car cams, but it was a highlights package that was put into Grandstand, which was our BBC Saturday afternoon TV sports program, which went through the whole afternoon. But it was months afterwards. But that did lead to whole generations of people understanding that track and that race, and that followed through to me with the joy there was when I was asked to be part of the Bathurst 12 Hour. Decades later, and the familiarity of that place because you'd been given the opportunity to see it. And I think there's something in that with the the carryover that virtual racing and gaming can actually have, but it needs to be done with intelligence. It needs to be done with a view to, what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to earn some money, or are we trying to build the core real world platform?
Yeah.
And I think if we've lost that second part of it, my view would be you're not doing it right.
Yeah, okay. We've got some people in our live chat saying that they've gotten into racing through gaming. Ollie again saying that video games are the new car poster up on the bedroom wall, and you can see behind me I have the bedroom wall poster, which is my Porsche 911 RSR, thanks to Need for Swede, which is one of the users in the subreddit. Great name. But yeah, the reason I'm actually so into Porsches is because of the Need for Speed Porsche 2000 game back in the year 2000. That was a game. Pardon?
It doesn't make you a bad person.
Oh no, absolutely not.
No.
I
mean, I just see from. I think I'm pointing in the right direction to that poster. I mean, posters. You know, I'm looking around my office now, and I've got some lovely ones. Like Andy Blackmore, original print that he sent to me. God bless you, Andy. On one wall, there's a fantastic IMSA poster.
I've got this year's spotter guide on my wall, just out of frame.
There you
here.
go.
Yeah.
There's a poster just sitting behind the camera, which I might turn this around and show you a little later, which was a Christmas gift from WEC, came from Gerard Naveau.
Oh, wow.
Which is a collation of original artwork from young artists from the WEC from some years ago. And then that poster, one behind me, is the BMW Z4 GT3. Bruno Spengler, Timo Glock, and the beloved Alex Zanardi, when they did a Michel Vaillant car at the Spa 24 Hours. And Alex, get well soon, pal. I mean,
of course.
It's just one of my absolute favourite people in the whole world. These things, I mean, these things we have around us, that's another keystone, isn't it? It's the kind of, call it obsession, passion.
Yeah.
It's the things. I look at the things that are around me. Behind the camera here, there is what is supposed to be a whiteboard. I'll show you just briefly.
Okay, here we go, everyone. Oh, maybe not. Maybe we've lost him. Oh, there is a poor network connection. Are we back? Hello again, Graham.
We are back. Hello. So that's supposed to be my office whiteboard.
Yep.
But it's now covered in stickers and clippings and just mementos, and it's just that summarizes the passion, doesn't it? It summarizes why it is I do this rather than go to an office and do something else.
Yeah.
It's about the people and the places and the happenings and meeting friends, whether or not you're working or whether or not you're going there for your leisure time. So there's all sorts of reasons why I think we need to think about the virtual world as a part of the picture.
Yeah.
I'm not at home to any kind of discussion about will this dominate or will that dominate. It has to be symbiotic.
Yeah,
it has
two pieces of a puzzle.
Because it does, because without a healthy real world product, there's no new input into the virtual world product.
Yeah.
Without the virtual world being healthy, you miss out on that opportunity, a massive opportunity, to refresh the audience for the real world. And I'm not seeing enough, I don't think, of my real world racing colleagues getting it right yet.
Yeah,
there are some areas where they do. There are other areas where there are massive opportunities that have not yet been delivered on.
Yeah, and I think an exception to what you just said there is, in my part of the world, the V8 Supercars E-Series, while they were in lockdown, they had all of the full-time Supercars drivers
properly produced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with full graphics and everything, and it was as much as the real thing. And they had international wildcards as well. I think they had Lando Norris, they had Max Verstappen, and it really legitimized the entire venture because they had everything done as if it was the real thing.
I think the sensible thing to look at here is you've got to move with that marketplace. As a for instance, it might be that what you're trying to do is to move an audience towards your primetime TV product for the real world racing. And the cost of doing that, the cost of getting to the point where you add percentage points to your audience might be that you have to invest You have to invest in doing something, maybe late night, that is on a terrestrial channel or a popular cable channel or whatever it is that you've got. That is an additional product that's seamlessly integrated within the offer across the board. I think there's a lot more that can be done moving forward to make that a bit less clunky than it currently is.
Yeah.
Don't pretend it's something it's not, but just see it as a valued part of that family. And don't be afraid to introduce new talent into that, to give people the opportunity to express themselves. But the key, the core to this is very important, I think, which is both sides of that transaction need to do one thing that sometimes they're not great at, which is stop taking yourself so seriously. Yeah. Stop it. I'm not going to be one of those guys that turns around and goes, "It's only a game."
No.
I have tweaked a couple of tales when it was kind of, I think there was reasonably, notoriously did say in answer to one of my journalistic colleagues who was sounding off about Fernando Alonso being given a bye at the virtual Le Mans, going, "It's not real." Now, I did it for effect, of course I did. But there is a degree here of, guys, get over yourselves a little bit here. Stop taking everything so damn seriously.
And especially for an event like Le Mans Virtual, which to me, it was marketed as an exhibition, like here is what we could do. It was great that it turned into a great race, but it was an exhibition. It was, here we've got half a field of professional drivers, half a field of sim racers. Let's put them together and do something to field this weekend that should have been in the middle of the French countryside.
Yeah, and people genuinely missed that, and people genuinely felt sorrow about not being able to do something.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's not forget, for very many people around the world, that is their thing. That week, that is what they build up to. It's what they save up for. There you go. And I look at some of the people
we've got more hands up in our chat. People putting hand up emotes. Yeah.
I mean, there's a long time reader of ours and friend of mine that I've met multiple times at race meetings, has covered at least one race meeting for us, Paul Market in the States, who Paul was supposed to be coming this year for the first time. And it's that thing about through the full year before that, because I'll give Paul this one thing, he is keen, and and it's, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and what about this, and what about that, and what about the other. And I was looking forward to seeing him, meerkat-like around Le Mans. And it didn't happen.
Yeah. And that's my experience as well. I had plans in place to go this year with some of the people I know through this podcast. It was going to be, I was going to meet up with Ian Chicken and Matt Pig, who are the heads of Sportscar Worldwide, and the Facebook, the fan forum, and we were going to go into the Ginetta garage and do some PR because, of course, our groups were all involved with the Ginetta LMP1, but that didn't happen either. So it was quite a frustrating year and quite a frustrating time for that entire thing.
But I guess what I'd say in response to that is this: there's a learning point here.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is to remember how important that is. And when we get to the stage where we all do, where the minutiae and the picky parts of this start to become a bit too important, is let's remember the big picture. The big picture is, the fight is, let's get back to that point.
Absolutely.
Let's get back to that point and let's pull together and stop the negativity that happens around here. The final thing I'll say about this is this, and you'll have heard me say this both in terms of things I've written and in terms of things I've said: spare a thought for the people whose job it is to make these things happen. I cannot begin to imagine how hard this has been and continues to be. In more or less daily contact with a variety of people I work with in a variety of different race series, some of which is for public consumption, some of which is for friend-to-friend communication, some of which is me being part of helping them towards a solution. And the barriers to bringing these things across the line are just absolutely enormous right now. I mean, quite aside from, as we said a little earlier, the difficulty of physically finding flights to go to places, It's not as easy as it was. And I can't remember, was it before or after we pressed live for this that I talked about
It was
flights?
before.
Before.
Yeah.
Right, well, let me tell the story. So I have a bit of freelance work next week. I don't know if that plane is flying over you or me.
It is definitely you.
There you go. That's a millionaire flying by.
You can tell it's live, everyone.
There you go. I don't know the millionaire, by the way.
Are you sure? You might.
I do know some millionaires.
Oh, stop. I met Roger Penske. Does that count?
I've met Roger Penske. He said these words to me, and I've always remembered them. It's, who the hell are you? So back to this flights thing. The flights thing. So I've got a couple of days of work in Europe next week. I'm not going to tell you who with, or where or when. There you go. But it's interesting. And that is middle of the week, 2 days. But it's a 4-day trip. Why is it a 4-day trip? Because in a situation where the European city that this is based around, up until this year, there were multiple airlines flying multiple flights every day. There is now one airline flying one flight every 2 or 3 days, in and out. And that's been pretty common through our experiences of getting to and from places in the latter part of this year. And that is going to remain a major challenge moving forward, is we're not through this yet. And however bad it's been for motorsport, the travel market and the events market,
and
it's
tourism.
Catastrophic. Yeah. Absolutely catastrophic. So I feel for them. I feel for that marketplace, and that's going to continue to have some impacts. I'm absolutely sure of that.
And on that note as well, I'll briefly mention here that what's happening in Europe has had an effect over in Australia, because we've gone in an entirely different direction. We've gone quite heavy and hardcore. Like, for example, I am in the middle of a 3-day lockdown because of a cluster that's happened in my city, but the worry of international flights coming into Australia has meant that events like the Bathurst 12-hour have been cancelled for next year. So
gone.
That will come back, of course.
Should say this. I'll say this now, and this is a bit of news I know for you guys over there in Australia. You know that COVID's all over everywhere else, and we've just been kidding.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're just enjoying the fact you're all locked up.
Oh, well. Well, I mean, it's only...
Not true.
We're going through the world's shortest lockdown. It was going to be 6 days, now it's only 3 days.
Heard the pizza restaurant gate, or whatever it's going to be called.
Oh.
Complete. If you've not read this story this morning, I read it this morning, you kind of think, really?
I was in the middle of a very intense work conversation about what's going to happen next week, because, of course, that was... are we classed as essential workers? Can we leave? And then in the middle of it, it's just like, oh, we're out of lockdown tomorrow. Anyway, that's an entirely different thing. If you want to read up on Adelaide's pizza debacle,
it's so ridiculous.
It is. It is quite ridiculous.
It all basically comes down to how many people in Adelaide?
1.3 million, I think, and it was 20 cases.
Affected by one guy who told a lie.
Yeah.
To track and trace.
And I feel bad for that guy. I feel pity for him, because boy howdy.
No, I would drag him around the street course behind a V8 supercar as an example to the rest.
Well, you can't anymore because they also cancelled that.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to get into that. Be a nice way to finish it. Be a nice way to finish it.
I'm not getting into that, because that's a podcast for another time when I'm in a much better mood.
It's, I mean, worth saying, by the way, if you've not heard me say it before, it's an interesting thing about, we talked about this business about encouraging an audience. Your city is exactly the example.
Yeah.
If I think now about the Aussies I know involved directly in motorsport, it would not be an exaggeration, with the exception of drivers.
Oh, and drivers, yeah.
Skippy's a massive exception in so many ways. So many ways.
I'll tell him you said that.
Not many of which are suitable for a family broadcast. But the majority of people I know who are actively involved in international motorsports from Australia come from Adelaide. Yeah. Why? Because there's a motorsport culture there, because they have an international racing scene, early.
Yeah.
And they tend to be that kind of generation. Jane Rowe at the Asian Le Mans Series, Jackie Warnock.
Richard Craill.
Never heard of him.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, some dude, he lives in the Barossa, talks a bit, I don't know.
Guy looks a bit like a koala.
Pardon?
He looks like a koala, that one.
Yeah,
he
a
does
little
look
bit.
like a
Yeah,
koala.
yeah.
Yeah. Or Ryan, yeah. So, yeah,
Me.
the answer is, it's all these guys. You?
Yeah.
You?
Do I make that list now?
Don't forget him there. But it's true. And then you look at what happened with the bend and all of that coming up. Would that have happened had there not been that culture? It just wouldn't. So that, I think, is an example of embracing a culture and seeing what you can get if you allow that to thrive. And yeah, let's wait and see how that one goes to the virtual world. I hope it does. I hope we see some intelligence moving forward.
It absolutely should, and it is a tragic loss. And the fact that Murray Walker from your part of the woods has come out and commented on it is a testament to its stature in international motorsports. And I have many words that I am going to reserve for another time, because we should talk about something more sports car related. And I actually wanted to talk to you about Le Mans. I wanted to talk to you about your experience of being at Le Mans this year for this year's race in September with no fans, social distancing, masks. I believe you were the only media at the track. I don't think that you told me there was not quite.
So normally speaking, there's something well over 1,000 media are accredited for the Le Mans 24 Hours. This year it was a tenth of that. The vast majority of those were in the press room and were not allowed in the paddock at all. So well over 100 of those. And of those 100, it's broadly speaking, about 60-40 were photographers, some of whom were accredited by the teams. So most of the journalists were not permitted into the paddock. TV were permitted into the paddock. That was part of our same bubble. And there were a very small number of journalists, not in the press room, but in a supplementary press room, actually in the TV compound, a porter cabin. Good luck, guys. I think 5 or 6 of them that were allowed paddock access because they weren't in a separate. So it's all done with these bubbles, etc., etc. Still not an ideal solution because, of course, still not allowed in the working areas of the garages. So what was it like as a experience? Weird.
Yeah, okay.
I think so. First things first, visually very different. None of the huge hospitality setups down to the Ford chicane. After day one, spent my entire week in the TV compound, a little bit in the paddock. Had literally one meeting with a major series head in the paddock. We had one briefing with the ACO and IMSA people around the hypercar regulations. The only time I left that compound, if you like, was the Goodyear flight, the blimp flight.
Oh, yes.
Which was during the race, which was extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary.
That must have been quite a nice view, but also quite an eerie view to see Le Mans from above with only just the track and no campgrounds, no fanfare.
It's in some ways quite sad and quite emotional. I mean, my journey with Le Mans began with my son, who's now in his 30s, before he was 10. I mean, we went in 1995 to watch the race. It was his passion. That led through to me attending that race for 5-6 years with James. He still goes with his friends, etc., etc. There's various bits and pieces in this office that have come from that. In fact, I'm going to grab in a moment one of the infamous things that we've actually got in the office here, which it's actually just been taken off the wall because something else is going up, which is a bit of 90s GT1 history. There you go.
Wow.
That is part of the number 2 Toyota GT1.
Oh, no.
That crashed in front of us in 1999. And their signatures on there, that is Thierry Boutsen, Alan McNish, never heard of him, Ralph Kellens, were the 3 guys in that car. Car was leading and crashed out. But it was sad,
Yeah.
actually. There was a change to that pretty early on. The conversation with the team, and the team, for those that weren't watching what we were doing, that was the regular WEC crew of Martin Haven, Alan McNish, myself, Duncan Vincent, added in Ben Constant-Duras, Peter Dunbreck, Jeremy Campbell-Walter. Actually, no, Duncan wasn't there. Duncan couldn't come because of COVID. That's quite so. It's Hayley Edmund and Alex Legui in the pits. Became pretty clear there was something of a responsibility here. There's an awful lot of people around the world that wanted to be there. We could be there, and that was treated extremely seriously. The immediate effect on me, having been told who was coming for that crew, was okay. We've got a number of people who have done it before. We've got a number of people who haven't. It is a massive event. There is no time, because we have a far shorter time for people. There was no, for instance, 2 days at scrutineering to sit down with people and digest. So regular readers of Daily Sportscar will possibly have noticed that there was far less preamble on DSC this year than we've ever had before. And the reason for that is because DSC at the moment is not a paying gig for me at all. The TV is a paying gig for me, and it becomes that much more important when there's no live audience. So I spent 10 days writing the briefing notes for the TV crews. What does that mean? That means full briefing notes about what are the classes, what are the cars, who are the teams, and it was thousands and thousands and thousands of words. I mean, I literally profiled every single driver in that race.
Yeah, you said, I remember getting, you gave us a copy of that. Us.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you gave us, being the group that were working on it for DSC, and the only thing I could think,
of course I did, yes.
Yeah, the only thing I could think of when I got that was, boy, this would have been great to have a week ago when we were doing the preview podcast. Or you might have been listening to our preview podcast while doing it.
That was version 1.
Oh, really?
So I was still working on that right up to the green flag for the race.
Oh,
and
no.
Le Mans, for a professional journalist and for a professional photographer, is a grueling week. As a general theme, to compare and contrast what we normally do with what I did, I made a decision very early. We were not going to send writers to Le Mans.
Yeah.
Because
what was the logic? What was the logic behind that?
Logic was very simple. I knew that the writers were going to be in the press room and nowhere else. That means that your access to information is TV screens, timing screens, electronic media. You can just as easily do that from home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can confirm. Did that from home.
Yeah. There you go. So in a period where we had literally zero income for 4 or 5 months, there wasn't a lot to be paying people at all. So that was the decision-making process there. The social side of it, because of course my guys love to come to Le Mans, would have been absent as well. So we had one photographer, Pedro, with some backup from some of our other friends in the press room, and the only writer on site was me. That was it. And boy, oh boy, did I underestimate what was going to be involved in that week. With, of course, a group of 5, 6, 7 guys from around the world, including yourself, Michael, that were there effectively covering the sessions.
Yeah. So that was
what that meant.
That was myself, RJ O'Connell, Martin Little, Stephen Kilby, and Ryan Kish was the group.
That's right.
I think. Yep.
That's the group, and a great job you guys did.
It was actually, just quickly on that note, it was very interesting writing a practice report for FP1 with nothing but a timing screen and Twitter feed, because that was all, because you didn't have any cameras at that point.
We didn't have any cameras up, but here's the thing, that's what it used to be like.
Yeah.
And quite often, not with a timing screen, you'd actually have a timing sheet. So, I feel a little bit like, I remember this old fields around here. But
back in the day.
But compared to what it would normally be like. So normally we would rock up at Le Mans on the Saturday by ferry, the core group from DSC. The DSC fun bus would roll in. Sunday, Monday, we'd be in the centre of town for scrutineering. Huge amount of work being done there. That means that you're then finishing writing about each of those days about 2 a.m. the following morning-ish before you get 5-6 hours sleep. Tuesday, supposed to be a day off. Nah, that basically is when you catch up. And my regular deja vu moment is looking at my watch and thinking, how the hell did we get to 5 p.m.? And you're nearly finished with the stuff you collected from the day before. There's usually some press and PR activity there. Wednesday, Thursday is first track time, but of course it's quite late on in the day traditionally for that.
Yep,
so
after midday, yep.
There you go. So all sorts going on there. And then into Friday, which is the kind of fan day, but that's effectively another one where we're playing catch up. If you go and do the parade, that's that evening. If you're doing a campsite tour, it's that evening.
And of course, as well, that's the day that all the news breaks for
every press conference in the world. I mean, it's pass a shotgun time. It really is. It's kind of it's furiously busy for us. So maximum by the time you get to race day, the maximum amount of sleep you've had in a week before is 4 or 5 hours a day.
Bro.
Maximum. To get in on a normal Le Mans weekend, you are having to get to the circuit probably by about 7 a.m. to beat the crowds. Otherwise, it's just gridlocked, which again means that coming into race day, you've not had a full sleep. We've tried to do something a little more social, so there might be generally, but I might have a barbecue on Friday night with the extended DSC team and family.
Do you do a meetup as well, like similar to what has been done at Bathurst in the past, or?
Not really possible because a lot of the fans in town for the parade. For many years, I did the kind of campsite tour with Radio Le Mans, so I'm elsewhere. I have done the parade in recent years. So you try to do what you can to just make it a bit more fun, make it less grind.
Yeah.
So you're arriving in the circuit at 7 a.m. for race morning. Of course, the race start is hours and hours and hours and hours later. That time just goes in a blur.
Oh, I can, yeah.
There are other things to do, including, of course, a road to Le Mans race and
warm up,
all sorts of other stuff. Warm up the lot. And then from there on in, I think the most sleep I've ever had during Le Mans races, maybe about 3 hours. There might have been a year when I've been unwell that it's been a bit longer than that, but it's on the back seat of a car. That's where I sleep until I started to do the TV a couple of years ago. And at that point, it's a kind of caravan in the TV compound. But that's what it's normally like. So generally speaking, a Le Mans day is broadly a 36-hour working day.
Yeah.
That's broadly what it's like.
And
at times it's longer than that.
And from moderating a subreddit, it can feel like that down here as well. Because for me, of course, Le Mans starts at 10:30 at night normally. So, normally I've been doing stuff all during that day, setting up threads, managing community. And, we had a big change to the way that we ran the community this year as well. And then on top of that, I was working with you guys. And so I actually only got like 3 hours of sleep that night as well. And then trying to do 12 hours worth of race reporting the next day was not a good decision.
It's a killer, and it's
and that was a first for me. So I of course as well, and I'm sure people here listening know, the first big event that I did for DSC was the Bathurst 12 hour, and that was an absolute whirlwind, and that was this year, which is terrifying. But to get an opportunity to do Le Mans for that's like a dream come true, a small dream come true, but it was a very different way of following the race, because you're not just watching the race as an enjoyable sit back experience. I was intently, I had like pages and pages of notes following one of the classes, and at one point I had everything written and ready to go, and then the Rebellion car hit the wall, and I was like, well, I'll just throw that out.
There you go. That's exactly right. And it is like that. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, some no names, no pack drill, but we've had a number of people come through the doors of DSC over the last 2 decades. One very able writer, the dream was to come and do Le Mans, the absolute dream. and it's the way in which you have to follow it.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's intensive. And within 3 hours, utterly overwhelmed. Literally, I needed to kind of arm around the shoulder, go for a walk. It's going to be okay. Do it this way, try it this way, do that, do the other. Try not to worry, blah, blah, blah. It can be overwhelming. It is a strange thing. Endurance racing, it's one of those things that you either click with it or you don't. Mercifully, I've always clicked with it, and I thoroughly enjoy it. And it's that.
It's a bit like Test cricket. You gotta sit there and find the little stories.
There's going to be. I'm sure if someone kind of examine my brain, there's something in there that it's based.
So it's
is a
the
thing
hamster
about
wheel, right? The hamster wheel running around.
I'll give you an example. Of it was a Radio Le Mans year, pretty early on. So this would have been early 2010s, and covering qualifying with John Hindhaugh in a remote studio. So we weren't in the tribunes overlooking the track. We couldn't see the track. We had one crappy screen because it's dark anyway. It didn't do very much. And a timing screen. So I had a timing screen, John had a timing screen. John was calling it, I was effectively calling to him, this is what's happening next, John, this is what's happening next, John. And we had a very prominent member of the FIAWEC community in the room during that session. I won't tell you who it was, but this is a guy with big responsibility, huge heritage in endurance racing, was watching and listening to the way that we did it. And we finished it. It was exciting qualifying. And it was basically me saying to John, right, okay, John, you need to move from what you're talking about there, start talking about Dindo Capello's down a quick one. And he was watching this timing screen. He couldn't see what I was seeing. And what I was seeing was the rhythm of this thing. And it's that. It is understanding why things happen in a particular order, understanding that it's not always important to tell everybody about that rhythm, but making it entertaining. So it's what to miss out as well as what to get with. So it might be going from, and he's lost some time there in that third sector. That chance has got away. He's got one more chance on these tyres. But meantime, John, out on the circuit in sector one and going purple now, it's anticipating it's going to go purple. And it's that. It's trying to kind of deconstruct and then reconstruct a really complicated jigsaw that you've got emerging on that timing screen. The one thing I shouldn't forget, by the way, is the big change. Aside from the dates and aside from the structure of the race meeting being a lot more constrained than it was, aside from the fact there were no fans there, it's hyperpole.
Yes, that was a very different session.
I was absolutely a complete cynic about it, but you know what? With fans trackside, that is going to be a big hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have no doubt about it. I think it's going to be a big hit.
It's a kind of a mini, well, not a mini shootout because it goes for longer, but it's got that same sort of atmosphere as a top 10 shootout or the Alan Simonson Award at Bathurst. It's that sort of suspense and excitement.
Is it pure? No, it's pure speed. But here's where it's another one. This is one where I'll talk directly to my purist endurance racing audience, of which I'm one. Get over yourselves. Okay?
Fair.
It's basically, we're in the entertainment business.
Yeah.
And if that means that the Le Mans 24 Hours gets another hour of live terrestrial TV somewhere, that's a price worth paying. And it was exciting, and it did draw out the best, because it did also mean that teams and drivers that otherwise might not have had as big a chance of getting one of the big headlines had a chance of getting a big headline,
and
it showed
high class racing.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great addition. I hope they continue to develop that, and I hope that becomes something which draws people from the campsites and from the bars to the spectator fences to just watch what these cars do. Because honestly, you've had a chance now trackside to see LMP cars do what they do.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Yeah, I am part of me is very, very disappointed that I never got the chance to see LMP1 cars at full tilt, at least in their current configuration. We will have LMH next year, but according to a friend of mine, Cookie Monster, one of the people on the podcast, another moderator who went to Sebring and saw the Toyotas at Sebring last year, he said it was otherworldly. So
it's staggering. Let me give you a for instance. I think I've told the Joe Bradley story. I'll tell it again now. Okay. But two stories, both from the same race meeting at. One was a test, one was a race meeting at the Nürburgring. The Joe Bradley story was Joe was on a road trip down to cover the 24 Hours of Barcelona, if I remember rightly. So this is where Joe, being a northern lad, not that intelligent like me, that's not a straight line, Joe, from the UK to Barcelona via the Nürburgring, but it's a hell of a road trip.
Yeah.
Turned up with John Hindhaugh and was there not working. So it gave him the opportunity to go trackside, and he had a great time, great time in the stands, the arena, and then went down to watch trackside down at the S's at the back of the Grand Prix.
The Schumacher S's,
circuit.
yeah.
There you go. And he came up with a phrase, he's great with a turn of phrase, that has lived with me ever since. Because Joe's job at Le Mans is in the pits, it means whilst he's trackside, he doesn't get to see the cars at full tilt, almost ever. And this was his first opportunity. And happily, this was a year where we had the full spread.
Oh, 2016, 2015?
Something like that,
yeah.
So his phrase to me was, I knew what to expect because he's managed race teams, he's managed British touring car teams, etc., etc. He knew about the parameters of his performance. He said, but I was watching these cars come through, and he said my brain couldn't keep up with what my eyes were showing me. And I think that's a brilliant verbal explanation of what these things. It is literally like that.
Yeah.
When I've been down to, Beckett's at
Silverstone, yeah,
with Alan McNish actually a couple of years on the trot, and you want to go and sort out where it is you want to go and watch a race car, follow a racing driver, and we were watching the cars through from the rear, and you'd see a GT car come through, and then you see an LMP2 car come through, and that's impressive, and then the Toyota came through, and oh my god.
Yeah.
So that was one. The other one actually came before that. It was the year we went to the Nürburgring for the first time. They did a test. It was a Toyota test that was then expanded to cover the rest of the field. They allowed one of the grandstands was open and free to the public, so public turned up in their thousands to watch these cars.
Wow.
We had, from memory, I think it was 2 Toyotas, 1 Porsche, 1 Audi. And the Bicolos, I think, was there as well. Reasonable spread of LMP2s and a pretty good spread of GTE cars. But the media were not allowed in for the first day. We were allowed in for day 2. And it was, I seem to recall the day after the Spa 24 Hours.
Okay,
I think that's right. So I drove down from Spa with a couple of the guys, booked a room in the Dorint Hotel. Now, those of you that know the Nürburgring will know if you come around the Grand Prix Strecke, round onto the pit straight, as you're looking down towards the Nordschleife, down the pit road against the direction of traffic, the building on the right-hand side, on the exit of the final turn, is the Dorrance Hotel.
Oh, okay? Really? Oh, sick.
So it's an amazing place, fantastic bar, which you've got to see. Oh, and all sorts of amazing memorability. There's a Zach Speed Formula One car over the bar.
Wow.
So booked a room there, which meant that we could shoot that session from the balcony and I could hand time the cars. That was probably the first time I'd spent serious time simply observing the cars from trackside, because every other session I'm either in a press room or you're getting a kind of an opportunity for a little bit of a chance trackside, or I'm in a TV studio. Rather grand, a TV booth, let's call it that way. Extraordinary. I mean, extraordinary. To give you an idea of what that was like, so the cars would come out, they'd come around and blah, 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 and get up to speed. And then the Porsche would come around in traffic. And I'm not kidding, that under acceleration, I reckon that in the time it took the car to exit the corner, it had pulled a second out from the apex on an LMP2 car.
Wow.
It was quite literally like watching a car nailed to a bungee cord to the next corner. I've never seen acceleration like it. And it may well be that other things accelerate in road racing as quickly, but you've got to see that in the context of the other cars.
And the multi-class aspect, yeah.
And that's the point, is an Aston Martin Vantage GTE, a Ferrari 488 GTE, a Porsche 911 RSR are not slow cars by any reasoning. You get an opportunity to sit in a passenger seat for anything remotely that quick, it will change your aspect of speed. It just will. The braking, the cornering forces, the acceleration, these are real world monstrously quick cars. And yet, one of these hybrid cars just made it look pedestrian. I mean, pedestrian.
That's incredible.
It's an amazing thing. I do hope someone somewhere manages to keep one of those cars active so that we can continue to experience that. But it has been professionally one of my life's absolute privileges to bring that era to an audience and to try and explain what that's like. That has been, whenever I decide to finally read the books that are sitting over there, the moments just sit there and look pretty, and I've never had the time to read half of them. When I finally get that time and I reflect on what this part of my career has meant to me, that for me will be one of the absolute privileges. Is it will be seen as an albeit quite brief golden era,
but an absolute golden era.
The technology of those cars was just otherworldly. We forget that when the lean years come and it's another two Toyotas. I can't tell you how much I'm going to miss those cars.
Absolutely.
It's a source of absolute sorrow that the Toyota TS050 will never race again. The all-time quickest sports car in history. And that will stay that way for a long, long time.
So there's like 4 things that I wanted to talk about that just came up from that conversation. Very quickly, firstly, we had a question in the chat, which I think you've answered before, but I will say it to you again just very quickly. Do you still imagine yourself, can you imagine yourself ever being just a fan at a racetrack anymore, or is there always going to be that hamster wheel going on in your head trying to figure out the commentary or the strategy? Because I know for me, I can't anymore. I can't just sit there and be a fan. I'm always either watching from a commentary perspective or a media perspective or a marshalling perspective nowadays as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'd like to think that I could. I don't think it could ever be as intense. Knowledge is a powerful thing. Knowing what's behind it can also be a very frustrating thing.
Yeah.
Knowing what's behind the reason why that's happening, or that person's doing that, or I'd like to hope that it does, but I completely understand why people don't.
Yeah.
That when the tap is turned off to that contemporary ability to follow in that depth, that could be a very difficult thing. I mean, happily, I'm in a game in terms of the writing, at least, and if that carries on, there's no reason for me to stop at a traditionally retiring point. How long they decide they want to keep hearing my voice is up to them. It's a straight answer. I hope I do, because I love the people about it. I love the people aspects of it. I hope I'm still a welcome presence in a paddock, for instance, going forward. That people still want to talk to me and still want to exchange information and blah blah. I hope that's the case, even if there's nothing in it for either party other than the conversation. But I don't think you really know that until it happens. It was a source of sorrow to me that when Malcolm Cracknell stopped because of ill health, that we didn't see him at more race meetings than we did. But I totally get it. That if you're not able to express the passion, if you're not able to do those things that you previously did do, I can understand why you might want to turn that off. I still speak to Malcolm after most major race meetings, and we catch up, and it's still a kind of joyous part of my social circle. But I get it as to why he wanted to turn the wick down. I hope that's not the same for me. I hope it's not.
Well, if you ever are looking for an outlet, if we ever get you to figure out Discord, you can come and explain all the minutiae to people in Discord. We're very lucky that we have a lot of people who are very well in tune with what's happening in terms of watching from a timing screen, and people have built tools to explain those things better. So I think we've done very well to be an informed audience and to be able to share that minutiae.
I think that for me. What do I want to do moving forward? It's quite an interesting question.
Was that the question I didn't ask?
No. That's a good...
Gotcha.
It's good to be able to make a difference.
Yeah.
Okay. And if the difference you can make is for an outlook and an attitude, then I think that's a force for good. If your attitude is that you want to take this seriously but not too seriously, I think that's a force for good. If you want to use the access that you've got to try to influence change for the good, I think that's a good thing. And I hope that whatever happens moving forward, that's part of what my role is. Even if it's the kind of, grey-haired, slight wisdom of the grandfather type stuff, that if I get that moment to speak to someone and make a difference, to say, yeah, you say that, but a bit like actually the influence of gaming.
Yes.
That I think there is an opportunity for people to kind of, don't just cash in on this. Look at what you can do with this for the good. Look at the people who are involved in this and think about which of those people might have a role that crosses that Rubicon, that crosses between those two worlds. Don't just see them through that slightly hackneyed way of, this is not a group of people sitting in their underpants eating Cheetos,
Oh, we might be.
Probably are.
Not just a group.
But you know what I mean? It's that,
It's crossing that boundary.
Find ways, use is the wrong word, find ways of tapping into the creativity and intelligence that's created that community.
Yeah.
And the sense of community. Because that's so important.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm going to give you some glowing praise in a second, so don't get too out of shape. In terms of having a positive impact and having a measured opinion and being able to influence a community in a positive way and influence people in a positive way, I can say that 100%. You have done that for me in terms of not just as a sports car fan, but in terms of bringing you along to do some writing and some advice and some lessons I've taken from you to use in sim racing and commentary and this podcast as well. And then in return, I have been in a privileged position with the community that we have here in Endurance Chat and in the r/WC Reddit and the Discord to be that influence for a group of other people. So as a flow-on effect, thank you. And we've got someone in the chat saying that you're a chaotic good influence on the sports car world. That's your alignment.
Well, I'll tell you where it comes from. I'll tell you exactly where it comes from. I mean, my career has been spent as a communicator.
Yeah.
Initially as a trainee journalist, into PR, excuse me a second, I'll just switch this off. Oh, Stephen Kilby, hello.
Oh, hey, Kilby.
That's Kilby trying to get through. So,
we'll just put that away.
I'll give him a call later.
Just quickly on Kilby, I must say, people don't really realise, but Kilby is a very, very funny man, and people need to think about that more.
He doesn't mean to be.
No.
Kilby is
working with him at Bathurst was one of the best parts of that entire experience, and I learned so much from him that I was not expecting to. So that was great.
Was it the deconstructed cynicism of it?
Yes, absolutely.
cynicism comes with these things, and cynicism is a force for good as long as you don't let it dominate. I think. We've come back round to that.
There was a point there. There was a point there where McLaren was doing quite well at the end of the race, where it started to unravel for him. Oh, poor man. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you.
So that's all right. So, what did I learn? I learned early about the power of positive communication and the power that bringing facts and honesty to a situation can be for the good. And it seems to be a message that society as a whole has lost right now.
Yeah.
That is something that makes me extremely sad and at times extremely angry. My background, for those on the in the audience that don't know, is I worked for the UK government for 20 years as a press secretary. I worked, but Trudy and I were, watching The Crown on Netflix last night, and it's extraordinary to watch events unfolding in drama that I was part of. Yeah. I worked with a range of departments of state. I worked at Number 10 with 2 different prime ministers. I worked with the royal family. I was, part of my brief for a time was as a press secretary dealing with the government aspects of the royal estate and all of that kind of stuff, all sorts of things. But it brings into focus something that's primarily important. And I think here it's not as important in sport, but there are lessons you can bring with you. Honesty and openness really matters. Yeah. Because if you lose that reputation, that platform for basically being open and honest, you don't get it back.
Absolutely.
You don't get it back.
And
I think
this was something I wanted to dive into a little bit, because one of the things that the WEC can improve on is its communication. We've talked in our subreddit community. There has been an extensive discussion spanning very many years now on why doesn't the ACO and the FIA tell us more? Why, when they make balanced performance changes, like what happened to Aston Martin last year, why is it us or prominent members who are deconstructing these decisions and explaining it to new people? Why is it not something that the ACO is being open about? And I think that is something that is one of the major drawbacks of the FIAWEC. So is there room? Is there an opportunity for someone to come in and do that role for the WEC? Is it something that needs to be done?
I think it is something that needs to be done. I mean, I don't claim credit for very much. I'll claim credit for one thing here, which is that when we get the bulletins, as we do, usually fairly timely nowadays, more often than not, they will come with some red explanatory notes now.
Yeah.
It doesn't always the case. That, I think, came from a uber moan from me after all of us in the full-time WEC press corps were subjected to criticism from some of the manufacturers, some of the organisers about getting things wrong. To which the answer is, we wouldn't get these things wrong if you would explain. It's a bit like the math lesson, isn't it? Where you get the right answer but get marked down for not showing the working.
Yeah.
And it's that. And it's, look, I'm not an engineer. I've never had any formal technical training like that at all. Why would you expect me to understand your reckoning about equivalence of technology, which is the most furiously, pointlessly complex system I've ever been exposed to in motorsport? And actually, if you've come to that conclusion, this is the relevant adjustments you're going to make. You've done that based on evidence and data and with a philosophy behind it. So basically, over a period of time, it was please, please, please ask them just to explain what they've done and why they're doing it, what they're trying to achieve. Because success or failure is not determined by the results you see on track. It's determined by their performance against what the intention was in the first place. So it might not be that for whatever reason, in a world where there is balance of performance and success handicap and, pick another phrase, that, they're looking for absolute total parity in every single area. There might be other reasoning behind it. There is where they can take a step. And I know that's not something that's been particularly easy for some of the community that sits in the background. But yes, I think they can improve on that. I think there's a variety of ways in which they can improve on communications. I've got to be quite careful in terms of the way in which I talk about that publicly.
Yep.
You can be assured that there are a lot of conversations and no little correspondence that goes back in terms of, to be honest with you, you could have done this and this could have been better.
Yep.
Or, there have at times been conversations ranging from the absolute polite to the ranting argument and all points in between that basically say, well, you say that, but the key to it is this. And I know this is something we've talked about before. I know this is something that's reflected in the commentary we've seen, which is constructive feedback should always be welcomed. That should always come with courtesy.
Yep.
And it should always come with something which is radically lacking in very many areas of modern day life. And we'll talk about politics, hopefully for the last time, in talking about this, which is, I don't need any other arsehole to tell me what the problem is. I want them to tell me what their solution is going to be to that problem.
Yeah.
And if you're voting for somebody that is basically just agreeing with your point of view that they don't like the same things that you don't like, that's not solving anything. You need to know what their solution is going to be.
Yeah, that's something that's very sensitive to me right now because of this very brief lockdown that we've just had in Adelaide, so many people were witch hunting for what was the problem, when really what needed to be done was focusing on the solution. And there was a significant portion who did that, and that's why we've been able to get out of this so quickly. But in terms of like a motorsport aspect, or just even a further aspect, the more time we spend ruminating about what the problems are, there comes a point where it's not helpful, and we got to start thinking about solutions.
I think we've seen this, and I think this is in part, it's the evolution of social media.
Yeah.
It's not been a very pleasant one.
Well, it's been difficult. It's been the fastest, most widespread form of communication that humans have ever had. Of course, there's going to be some teething issues, and we've going through that sort of the back end of that now. With platforms.
We've come through a period of time where the biggest lesson learned by political strategists is a tragic one, which is lying to the public works.
Well, I mean, that's not a new lesson. That's not a new lesson. I mean, go back.
But never to this this degree, and never with the access for everybody to have access to multi-billion people.
This is going to take a very weird philosophical turn for a motorsport podcast. Anyway.
But here's the point: it is also a powerful force for good.
Yep.
Use it as a force for good, and watch what happens. I mean, as a for instance, I'm sure you've seen posts on Facebook, posts on Twitter, where you've got everything from a charitable cause or an educational cause to say, trying to teach my class about internet safety. Here's a picture of a rubber duck. Could you just retweet this and show people just how quickly something can get around the world?
Yeah.
And there are lessons that can be learned here about not just the content, but also about how quickly things can get radically out of hand. The flip side of that is it can be a force for good. It very often is a force for good, but I'm feeling as if those voices are being drowned out at the moment by some of that bullshit, to be honest with you. It would be very easy to believe. Think of a society, America, the UK, for that matter, Australia, where the international view of that society might be something's going wrong there with the general level of national intelligence right now.
Well, yeah.
It isn't like that. But people do need to kind of speak up and say, look, I don't agree with that, but come on, mate, that's completely ludicrous.
Yeah.
And it's that ability, that courage to stand up and stand up to the inevitable bullying that comes back from a very ingrained group. And the other final thing is this: there are some real blowhards out there, and there are, and the sport is no different to that, and every sport is no different to that. There are other lessons to learn from politics, and one of these is this: we saw it with our latest general election. A very deeply ingrained, entrenched ideological group can very easily feel that their ideas are universally accepted because the same 2,000 people always like and retweet them. It's not like that. And it's the same with every aspect of society.
And it's the same that we see in our community as well sometimes. We do have... I think as far as the Reddit hive mind goes, our community is slightly insulated by that, but we do have some very ingrained opinions, like, for example, that there is a very big cultural divide between the IMSA subreddit and the WC subreddit, because they're very much a little bit like this. There is a cultural divide to whether or not GT cars should be at Le Mans, which is an entirely different question. But there is,
I'll answer both those questions, by the way. Okay, number one, if you're of the mindset that it's one or the other, get over yourselves, because neither survive right now without the other.
Absolutely.
So the days of the old grand dynamic, I mean, it's boring. Okay. Two, it's completely unnecessary. Three, it's completely unrealistic. You're going to find that there's going to be more crossover, and there's never been a more important time for people to work together. As far as GT cars at Le Mans are concerned, GT cars are going to stay at Le Mans. Okay, they are absolutely relevant to it and have been part of it for most of history, with the exception of the Group C era, and even then they quite often were. So the reality there is, if that's your opinion, I disagree with you. The IMSA versus WC thing, bring it on. Okay, I'll happily do it. I'll happily do another podcast, and we can discuss just that.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
there is not one person involved in either part of that debate that at the forget the minutiae, at the core doesn't value the fact that both have got to be healthy for the whole thing to work.
Yeah. Brilliant. That's we got well off track here. Okay, let's try and
that's all right.
It's okay. We'll try and round back to a few things on my list.
This might be a 2 coffee podcast.
Might be a 2 coffee. We'll see how we go. Might have to have dinner soon for myself, because it's just ticked past 9 p.m. here. So you wanted to have a bit of talk about the journalistic marketplace. That's something that you said to me regarding Sportscars.
Just to basically point out the realities of, well, we talked about the travel industry. We talked about the event industry. It is really tough right now out there in the media world. I mean, to give you, for instance, I'll talk about my brother is a journalist on one of our national newspapers, and we talked through lockdown and found rather oddly that the basic figures were broadly the same. And to give you, for instance, he was telling me their readership at the time, both in terms of printed papers and particularly online, was up between 200% and 400% because people were at home with more time. Marketing income had gone down by 95%.
Yes, and I remember having this conversation with you when it was happening, and you said that there was 2 reasons for that.
There's lots of reasons. Yeah. Well, first things first. Companies aren't making any money, therefore they've not got the marketing spend, and they're certainly looking after those pennies, because in a situation where you're going to have to lay off a lot of people, and just about every company is going to have to, you don't want to be frittering money away, blah, blah, blah. The other part of that that's just flown out of my mind, you are absolutely right,
is that no one wants their marketing and advertisement to be tied to coronavirus news.
Basically, for the national newspaper side of things, there are effectively 3 stories in the UK over the last 6-8 months. You're absolutely right. Thank you for the reminder.
No problem.
Coronavirus, Donald Trump, and Brexit. None of them all that positive, it has to be said.
No, not at all.
So, that was the point at which, he says, look, it's been made clear that people don't want their happy, shiny consumer products next to doom, gloom and despondency, argument and, treachery around all those sorts of things. it is a really difficult time in the business of journalism right now. And not because there aren't stories, there's plenty of them, but finding ways to fund that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult right now. And I think you're going to find that even those people that are finding their marketplace reasonably healthy are going to start to struggle moving forward. Why? We're not at the end of this year.
No, no, we're not.
Very many of the print places you'll see, TV, online, that have got big brands at the top, those deals may not have been done for next year. So we're going to have to get into hashtag wait and see to see whether or not those organisations are in the same healthy state they currently feel they are coming into next year. Because, to be blunt, some of those deals won't happen, and some of those deals will be a lot tighter than they currently are.
Is that something that you are concerned about in your line of work as a sports car journalist?
Well, it's not my line of work as a sports car journalist. It's my line of work as a
journalist,
an owner.
Yeah.
As an owner of a media outlet. So my role within Daily Sports Car, I'm one of 3 owners of Daily Sports Car, but my role very firmly is to not just to edit it, but have a weather eye on the commercial side of things, and it's on its arse. It's as simple as that. There's no money out there that people want to spend on that. And we've had to work really, really hard to find new and interesting ways of keeping that alive. And we're succeeding. We're making it wash its face, but no one's earning a great deal of money out of doing that at the moment. And what that means is that as things roll forward, it might mean you have to do other things with parts of the time and that resource that you've got as part of that. The other thing to say is, pretty clearly, people are having to leave those industries. And again, my brothers, core employer, are losing about 30% of their staff. That is no small number of people when you're dealing with a national/international news organisation. So I guess it's this. My philosophy to start here is it's time everybody started working together to survive this, rather than seeing this as an opportunity to kill your opposition. Yeah. If that's what you're doing, fuck you. Is the straight answer.
There it goes. There's the F-bomb.
But honestly, I mean, this is a reality. This is it's a very human time. If that's what the attitude is out there, and it isn't from most people, then you're doing it wrong. Because the reality is going to be there is what you're killing. It may not seem this way right now. Is the marketplace? Why? Because let's say. I don't know, let's look at, let's say drag racing could be an opportunity to look at a closeted version. Now, let's say there's 4 or 5 nationally, internationally recognised outlets for drag racing, okay? And let's say they're struggling at the moment because they're not able to go racing. And let's say one of those drops off pretty immediately and you've got 2 or 3 others that are struggling, and maybe you end up with one utterly dominant force in drag racing. That doesn't work.
No.
Because what that means is you've got one outlet for people to actually tell their message, not 5. Yeah. That means that you might be soaking up a bigger proportion of that pool, but the reality is that the amounts are going to start to get less. Why? Because there's only one alternative. And the only thing that's going to happen there is you're going to start losing people from that part of the sport. A healthy marketplace everywhere means everybody wins. And I am seeing... in terms of the way that we interact with a number of, at times quite surprising, relationships with competitors are blossoming. Others see it slightly differently. And that, I think, is going to prove to be a mistake on their part.
Okay.
Whether or not we are still in the marketplace in 3, 4, 5 years, or whether or not we're not, I don't think that's paying dividends in anything other than the short-term financial right now.
Okay. Wow.
That
was a lot. I got very distracted in the middle of that because when you dropped the F-bomb, chat just blew up. So there's plenty of people who have
never heard me say. Well, there are 2 things you need to remember about live TV. Okay, don't say fucking bugger. Don't. It is quite it's a difficult part of it. I can be a little sweary at times. Friends of mine would.
Yes, can confirm.
Yeah, yes. not doing that on air when drama really happens can be quite a challenge.
Yeah, you kind of.
Press the kill button.
Yeah, I'm not sure about you, but when we do the broadcasting here and sim racing commentary I've done before, it's almost like a different like vocab space. So it's almost as if your brain settles in. It's almost like another language that your brain just sort of settles in. So do you get that sort of experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't recall ever having crossed that line on live TV or radio. I'm aware of other people that have.
Well, there's a very famous story for a V8 Supercars commentator. Are you familiar with Neil Crompton? Have you met Neil Crompton before?
I've met him briefly.
So there's, I think it was the 2008 V8 Supercars shootout where he dropped a C-bomb on coming back from an ad break. Yep.
Whoops.
On live TV. On live TV.
At the end of the day, we are human. And, never, in those circumstances, never underestimate the reality of the value of the word sorry. Okay? as I have said repeatedly to both of my children, okay, you're allowed to make mistakes. Just don't keep making the same mistake.
Yeah.
You're allowed to make mistakes, and there might well be some consequences to those mistakes. But, recognizing the humanity of a situation, I think is a core value we should also all see. We're not perfect.
No.
I'm patently not perfect. It's a mistake should be forgiven.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Neil is still doing the V8 Supercars commentary, and it was fine. It was just
outrageous, if you ask me. It should have been binned years ago.
Oh well, remember, this is Australia. Remember, Graham, this is Australia.
Mate, I actually, whatever the shortcomings at times of the V8 Supercars, story, their level of professionalism and the way in which that's presented on TV is an international example of what and how it can be done. And, there are lots of different examples in world sport, let alone motorsports, of organisations that take themselves way too seriously. And actually the humanity that comes through, the humanness that comes through with V8 Supercars is something that I think should be an example to a lot of people. Yeah, it's entertainment.
Yeah.
Make it entertaining. Make it entertaining.
And having been lucky enough to meet some of the people involved, like Neil Crompton, met him briefly, like Chad Nailon, like Matt Nolte.
Oh, Chad's awesome.
Chad is awesome. I would love to have a conversation with Chad more often. And Mark Larkham as well. I think Larko plays a very, very important part of the V8 Supercars story. And I actually had a chance very briefly doing some sim racing commentary like 2 or 3 weeks ago, a virtual Bathurst 1000, to pretend to be Mark Larkham, and it was awesome, and I want to do it more often. But is that just, have you seen what Mark Larkham does for the Supercars commentary?
Is he with the
whiteboard and everything? Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so do you think there is room for, say, an Alan McNish or a recently retired driver to do something like that for the WEC, to go, okay, we've seen this problem appear, how has this happened? Or we're at Bahrain, how is the tyres and conditions different to Le Mans, or something like that? Because I think
the physical difficulty with Alan is he can't reach the ball.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Alan will give him a footstool or some stilts or something. But
the answer is fundamentally yes. Yeah. Okay, what we have is a resource which I think has often been forgotten, and we've got something that no other area of motorsport has got. We've got time.
Yeah.
We've got time. A 6-hour race is a long time. So yes, that comes with the availability of budget. Because if you're going to put a whiteboard in, we're not in a standard studio format. I'm not sure how they do it with Supercars.
They have a garage.
Traveling studio?
No, they have when they do their broadcast hub, they have it in a shipping container, and when they do the Hino hub, or they call it, is a pit garage that they've kitted out. So they'll, like, I've been through there. It's all. They go nuts with that.
Yeah.
It's pretty nuts.
And it shows really well. I mean, I was actually talking to Ant Davidson.
Yes, he would be perfect for that sort of role.
F1. I mean, what was I'm trying to think of the incident. I'm not an avid follower of Formula One.
I feel like you're about to say Sergio Perez and Nico Hulkenberg at Canada. Is that? I remember him doing a very good piece with that.
There was one where he deconstructed the it was the overtake with the hybrid harvesting.
Oh,
Lewis
okay.
Hamilton was involved in this 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, okay.
Might be longer than that. And it was a zoomed version of what was going on with the wheel and the dash, and then an inset picture of the car, the rear, and the flashing light at the back of the rear of the car. And it was brilliant. And we talked about that, and he loves doing that. Loves doing that. And he's just as tall as
Stack it together. It'll work well.
You see the two of them together. It's
you
like
sit the board on the floor, and they'll be perfectly fine.
I think we should have maybe Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Munchkins, and but it's I think it would work. I think it would work. It would require a fundamental change in terms of the setup. Our setup is pretty basic. There are 3 of us in a commentary booth or in a truck. We don't have the access to that kind of trackside studio setup, but Alan does do some stuff for the app that gets closer to that. So anybody that actually does subscribe to the app will know that there's stuff that I never see, to be honest with you. I'm busy doing my thing, but he's often out there with Duncan or with Lou and doing this kind of more in-depth analysis. But do I think there's a possibility? Absolutely. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I think Le Mans, I think that could be a very, very cool part of it.
Imagine, for a first-time viewer at Le Mans, having a pit stop broken down for you in that sort of instance. I think that sort of stuff would be really good. Having, hey, we've just seen this incident, a gearbox failure. Let's pull apart a gearbox and see what's happened. I think that's something that is significantly lacking from the WEC coverage. And as you said, you have the luxury of time. You can do these things hours later.
Even if you did kind of B-roll, so things like, how does a gearbox work? How does a pit stop work? I mean, all that stuff doesn't have to be done live. That stuff can be done at any race meeting anywhere. The key is not overusing that resource. That you're not thing that does make me want to do a pass the shotgun moment, which is, tell me again about your history in the sport with that 3 minute kind of inset video, please.
Yes, once more.
Because I wasn't bored after the first time.
No, not at all.
It is that recognition that you've got to accommodate the commercial realities, but you've got to keep the audience as well.
Yeah.
Okay, and not also getting into this part, which is the flip side of that is our burning need to know something should not be confused with an essential part of the broadcast. So it is that thing about whether or not what you actually do is to say, it might be something, for instance, like Alan might say something like, you can see there the guys look at the back of the car, not sure. It could be an issue there with the gearbox. This is what they can do, this is what they can't. Press the red button now and you'll see me talking to Sam Hignett at Jota Sports about just what's involved if they have to do a gearbox change. Boom, back to the coverage. That's what red button coverage can do for you. Without a shadow of a doubt. It is that business around accommodating the burning need to know, or at times the endorsement of what we think we know, with the reality of needing to carry on with a real-time commentary, whether or not that's 3, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 24
hours. Yeah.
So awesome. I think it does have a part of it. Keep telling us. Keep telling us these things.
Yes, we want to see it. We want to see it. I want to do it.
Let me tell you the reality of what happens after every single WEC race.
Yeah, okay.
Reality is we do notes.
Yeah.
Okay? We exchange those notes between the core team. That's distilled down into a document that goes to the production team and the series management. Here's what we think should be done. Okay? At times they can be quite short, at times they can be very long indeed, at times they can be expressed politely, at times we can be pretty blunt about some shortcomings of certain aspects of the package. And it is a team. There's no doubt it's a team. We can't change everything, and some of the things we can change can't be changed overnight, and some of those are very tied to the availability of time and therefore budget to be able to do them. But there is nobody in that team that wants to do a half-assed job.
No.
Everybody wants that to be the best it possibly can. And what I'm delighted to see is we've got a team that after the race we had at Bahrain, we sat down and said, want to come and do this again together? Hell yes.
Awesome. That's beautiful. That's exactly what you want to hear. And you definitely sort of see and hear the sort of camaraderie that you have as a team through the commentary, which is fantastic.
Can't stand either of them.
Oh, yeah, I doubt it.
Hateful individuals.
So we're almost at the 2-hour mark, so let's whiz through a few things quickly. We've got one very quick question. It has to be very quick, Graham. You can't waffle on. How does one make a name for themselves in such a niche part of the motorsport world? You kind of carved out this little cavern in endurance motorsports as being the sort of like almost the voice. I don't want to quite say the voice because I think John Hindor is still around. So you've got that going for you, but also with your work with Daily Sportscar, you've become the sort of well-informed, mature, on the ball, but nuanced and controlled voice of sports cars. How does one carve out that sort of niche for yourself? Answer in like a minute or less, if you can.
I think the answer is it's not been a conscious decision to do it. I think it's not. I mean, it's kind of the journalistic side of things was always a hobby. That's what it came to be around other big jobs I was doing. I sort of stumbled into the broadcasting side of things. Both of those then are fed by the 30 years of training I had in real world, work in communications. That then comes the kind of natural way in which my mind works. At times it's fed by the irritation of misinformation or the absence of information. It's absolutely assisted by the fact that I enjoy interaction. And for that, I'd say, by the way, full credit to the way in which Radio Show Limited evolved in terms of encouraging that interaction. I think it's moved on very substantially now. But the opportunity to share, the ability to realize what you are doing is someone else's dream job, and not feeling as if that's a position of taking this position. It's taking that position.
Yeah.
It's my job. If I'm going to provide value for the people that fund me doing what I'm doing, whether that's going to races for Daily Sportscar or being paid to talk about races by the other people, is to engage that audience.
Yeah.
And if I'm enjoying engaging that audience beyond the point when I'm being paid to do it, isn't that a fun thing to do?
Absolutely.
I enjoy what I do.
Absolutely. And there's something that Richie Benno, I'm sure you're familiar with Richie Benno's commentary in cricket.
Oh, yeah.
So something he always said is that he was a servant to the game. And I feel like, yeah, absolutely. And I get that impression from the way that you talk and the way that you talk to fans. And I want to carry that as well, because, the fact that...
I love, if I get the chance, I love talking to fans. I love it because I am a fan.
Yeah.
I'll always be a fan. Okay. It is that thing about, I totally get it. I also totally get that very many / most fans, if they're lucky, get to go to one race a year. That going to the Bend this year was great because you were talking to people who were seeing these cars for the very first time, and a lot of them had always wanted to go and see those cars.
Absolutely.
There was one guy on the balcony at the Bend. I think he must have been knocking 70 years old. Tears in his eyes. I mean, it's just great. It's great to have that opportunity to talk with experience to people who've got the passion and are getting that opportunity for the very first time. It's a wonderful part of what we do, is to share experience and knowledge.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power. Bullshit.
Whatever.
Knowledge is something that needs to be shared and needs to be out there and needs to help people to build that passion.
And something that I've done my best to try and carry on, I think this is something you've said to me, or maybe it's something I've just come up with on my own, which would be surprising, is ask the questions or write the answers to the questions that you're asking. Like when it comes to writing articles or doing podcasts or whatever, what are you as a fan interested in knowing, and how can you get that information to other fans? Yeah. So that's.
I mean, here's the point. People talk about the stereotypical, really vanilla interviews you get with total superstars. And in part, that's because of the industry that's built up around them. There's protective ring, damn it. But in part, it's because there's a lack of imagination, okay? And it needs someone just to burst that bubble. And I can remember, Ant Davidson's a great example of it. The very first year of the WEC, we managed to get a little bit of funding to get people on planes from Toyota. And what that funding paid for was me to do interviews with each of their drivers, in-depth interviews, which were then handed over to Toyota for their website. And one of the nicest things anybody's ever said to me after an interview was Ant Davidson after that interview. And he said, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I really enjoyed that. And that was just absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example, because examples are always great fun. And it was another Joe Bradley moment. Joe, between shifts at Daytona, often comes and sits with Marshall and myself and Stephen Kilby in the press room. And at Daytona, it's set up with a top table with microphones on a stage, and then there's, at right angles to that, 4 rows of desks.
Yep.
And through the week and through the race, they bring in significant people who either explain how their race has gone or make announcements, etc. And this was the year that Fernando Alonso came for the first time, and it was all very deferent, and people weren't sure. And it was going on, and Fernando, it was pretty clear, was pretty engaged, but not really very excited by it. And Joe then spoke up, and he said this: Fernando, how do you think you're going to cope with being asked to wake up in the middle of the night and perform immediately? And Fernando, to his absolute credit, it's on the web somewhere, genius. And you could see it in Joe's eye twinkling, just genius thing. And Fernando turned to him and said, it's never happened to me before. and that's what you look for.
Yeah.
You look for someone to break through. You look for someone to just engage with people. An interview is a one-on-one transaction. And if you're not bought into that transaction, you'll get nothing back.
Yeah.
So I've got a variety of ways in which I try to put people at ease that I don't particularly know very well. And I try to make it as light-hearted as possible. And I'm not always trying to find out a blazing truth.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking to find out more about that person. And sometimes you have to invest in an interview with someone that first time to build that trust before actually the second time is the one where you get the better material.
Yes.
You've just got to remember, what's it like when you meet a person for the first time socially? Can be a bit awkward.
Yep.
Can be, what's going on with this guy? I mean, those people are out there in the dating world. It's exactly the same. First date can be very awkward. Second or third date, let's not go any further than that. I'm not saying that's how my interviews go.
Whoa.
They really don't.
Whoa. This is the second time we've had you on Endurance Chat, Graham. What are you getting at?
But you get the point. It's that business about building up a little bit of trust with that person, that transaction, and then just drilling a little bit further into that to get more.
You've used the word trust there again. Is a lot of journalism and a lot of communication about trust, about trusting your interviewee to give you the right stuff, and then the other instance, trusting that you can then deliver that in a respectful way?
I have various red lines. We all got red lines in life, okay? My 3 red lines. I normally say 2, but there is a third. I don't do well with snobs.
Yeah.
I fundamentally don't do well with bullies. I will not be bullied. And you don't lie to me twice.
Yeah.
Simple as that. If I'm lied to and I find out, number 1, you're going to find out that I know. And number 2 is you won't be trusted again. And we will have that transactional conversation that I know. So it's something where I don't have very much of an amusement filter about that. Most people in my orbit know that. And most people absolutely respect that. I'm perfectly happy to be told by somebody, I can't talk about that.
Yep.
I'm not happy to be told by someone some bullshit that I then go and repeat to readers, and it makes me and them look ridiculous. So I think the answer, trust is a really important part of it. I'll give you a Stephen Kilby moment, actually. you cross these bridges. And Stephen got to the point where I can remember the conversation with him. He said, I'm enjoying it now because the realization is they do want to talk to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's not me having to persuade them to spend that time. It's they're as passionate as I am about this. And in the right environment, they will open up because they do want to talk about how passionate they are about it and about what's happening and how well or otherwise it's going. If you can get to that point and it's not adversarial, I think everybody gets a bit more out of it. You might not get the absolute scoop every time, but the difference is that I'm probably going to be welcome for longer.
Yeah, and you start to build those relationships. Even in my short 2 events that I've done, you start to build those relationships with those you see on a regular basis. So
you do.
I think a sort of crowning moment for me at Bathurst was running into Garnet Patterson, the racer from Adelaide, who I'd met at the bend and connected with. We had a chat. I ran into him in the paddock and he took me aside and said, "Hey, how are you going? Is everything going right?" I was like, "I've been recognised in the paddock. This is kind of scary."
There you go. When you get to the stage where people are doing that for a chat and without reason, or are just looking for a bit of help or information, that's a really fulfilling part of it. This morning before we started, I think three teams, team owners from around the world, ringing and just saying, "What can you tell me about this? How's that going?" There's no story in it for me. I think where I'm different to some is this. I'll give up the 100 clicks any day of the week if the phone call I make to that person next time is more welcome.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I'll never forget this. It's their business. It's their career. It's their life, not mine to draw out. And, you know, sometimes you feel you have to kind of cross into iffy territory. I don't step away from controversy if I feel it's necessary. But I'm not someone who feels the need to live my life by the buzz of having to have a scoop every single day. It's destructive.
Yeah.
It's destructive in terms of relationships and in terms of trust. It's destructive in terms of the layering that you can get out of a career doing what we do.
Yeah.
And that will never be me. And if people see that as a failing, up to you. I'm perfectly happy and fulfilled. I'm perfectly happy that I've got lots of different ways in which I can contribute to my business and my industry. I'm perfectly happy with that. Good luck with trying to carry on with constructive relationships if what you're doing repeatedly is just looking for something that's a little bit more exciting than it actually is.
Yeah, trying to make something appear out of something that isn't there. Yeah.
Yeah. The enemies, by the way, are stories where you read the words could, should, and might too many times.
Yeah.
Because that's when you get into the areas of speculation. What that generally means is you know something's going on, but you can't nail it. There's could, should, and might, and multiple paddock sources have told us. Okay, which basically means one person's told you, and you can't nail it down, but you're afraid that someone else is going to get it first. Not interested in that marketplace on a day-to-day basis. There are elements, there are times when that I think is necessary to push a button, but there are more often than not, for me, the relationship that comes out of not doing it is more important than the 50 or 100 clicks you get by doing it.
Yeah.
I don't think you're making a fundamental contribution to the industry by adopting that kind of attitude to it. And by the way, just in case you're one of the people in my industry that might listen to this and think it's aimed at you, it's not aimed at one person. It's aimed at part of the industry that deals with news and only news.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty soulless place at times, the news market.
Yeah, and I'm noticing that more and more as we go through this year, that sometimes there exists news just to drum up controversy. Like I'll reference the knockdown we're having in Adelaide at the moment. There has been a significant outcry against a particular line of questioning of the Premier and of the Health Minister and of the Police Commissioner, because everyone has begun to recognize that all they are doing is looking for a headline, and it has started to fall back on them because now everyone's saying, don't listen to what they're saying because it's a joke.
I'll give you an answer in a parallel to this, which is in a conversation with one of the series I'm involved with.
Just
and
as
their
a
level.
quick aside before we go any further,
Sure.
you don't have to worry about anyone in the industry listening to this, because, I mean, like,
I think
no
you
one
might
would
be
listen to
surprised.
this.
You might be surprised, but here's a parallel for you. Talking to one of the series in which I'm involved with about the quality and level of communications during lockdown, where I've been fairly critical of the lack of communication. And the answer came in a very civilized conversation, but we couldn't give them the answers. To which the answer is, they know that.
Yeah.
These are intelligent. There is not one business in international sports car racing that it hasn't got a turnover in the high six figures. Not one. Okay. And most of them, it's in the seven figures.
Yeah.
These are, if you're carrying on with that year after year, you're not an idiot. Okay. So they get that you don't know. What they want to feel is, transactionally, they want to feel that there's somebody that cares about the well-being of their business as part of this. And what they actually want to hear is someone picking up the phone and going, "Hi, it's insert name of French person. It's
Sorry.
it's
Got me.
it's how you're doing. How's things?"
Yeah.
And from there on in, you can have a conversation. It's everybody knows we don't know when this is going to end. Everybody knows that they can't say we're definitely going to be going to insert name of circuit on insert date. We all know that. What you want is to be treated as an important part of that community. Yeah. And it's that phrase of, what I said about the how you doing, mate?
Yeah, how you doing?
Yeah, that's it.
Absolutely.
It's that. I think it's that simple. That, by the way, that little phrase is the antidote to all the other bullshit. How are you doing?
100%. And one series that has done that very, very well, in my opinion, has been the Asian Le Mans series. Not only did they put in place a provisional calendar very early to say, this is what we are thinking, get on board if you can. And then when that became obvious that wouldn't be the case, here is what else we are thinking. Can this work for you? Cyril Chase Wallen and the crew at the Asian Le Mans series has done a fantastic job, and that is going to be a big series next year because it's 4 events in 3 weekends or something along those lines.
It is. It's over 3 weeks in Abu Dhabi. It's going to be 2 races the first weekend, then there's a gap because there is another booking for the circuit.
Yeah.
And then further 2 races on the second weekend, 2 different track formats: night racing, day racing, day into night racing.
Oh, that's so cool. And
so
there's a lot of really exciting things going on in the Asian sports car market at the moment. Not only the Asian Le Mans series, which has just grown unbelievably in the last few seasons. And we'll be returning to the Bend, hopefully, in the future. Thank God.
Oh, we will.
Absolutely. But also Asian GT as well, and Australian GT just announced that partnership with SRO, which has made me just the happiest clam on the planet.
Let's say just a quick word about that. There's inevitably, because there always are, predominant force in GT racing comes into national marketplace. The sky's falling. No, come on. SRO bring stability with it.
Absolutely.
They bring a rule set with it. They'll bring certainty with it. They'll bring a level of professionalism that unfortunately Australian GT has not managed to deliver in terms of a range of things, not least their comms has been pretty bloody ropey for the last couple of 3 years.
Yep.
So and that should hopefully add to the health of that marketplace. The next thing I want to see from that is I want to see SRO and Cyril's team sitting down and talking. They have previously. There has been some collaboration over not clashing with calendars in recent years, which has been great to see. There needs to be just another notch there with Australia. I hope that can happen, because I think that would add immeasurably to everybody's level of enjoyment about it. If we could get to the stage where at the Bend we've got a guesting group of 5 or 6 cars for the Australian GT Championship, if that means that 1 or 2 of those decide to add the Asia Le Mans Series and maybe World Challenge Asia to their plans, that can only be a good thing for everybody and makes things sustainable.
And I was quite surprised that we didn't see that at the Asia Le Mans Series this year. I would have thought that some of the established Australian GT teams, of which arguably there are none anymore, would have taken up that opportunity. But we did see a smattering of Australian drivers, which made me very, very happy. But otherwise, I think of the ace, you got something you want to say?
It came close. It came close.
Yeah, okay.
So Cyril and Jane Rowe, Cyril's media director, press secretary, if you like, visited Australia, visited teams and manufacturer operations there. It came pretty close.
Okay.
But as with anything that's a first brave adventure, bit of baby steps.
Yeah.
It was a successful meeting. Coronavirus has put a pause to that. But I think if you were speaking to a far better looking and more neatly coiffured French gentleman than I can possibly do an impression of, he would probably share with you, he already has, an idea about a provisional calendar moving forward for next year. I hope that involves the Bend. I hope that involves Suzuka, where we were supposed to be going this year, and that obviously couldn't happen either. He is driven, and absolutely the example that others should be looking to of how to communicate to his customers, because they're the most important ones. Without that, there is no show. And where he invests in terms of the ability to externally communicate. And that means what we do at the circuit with words, with pictures, with social media, and with what we do with the TV package. Look at what they've got to play with, okay? Then look at the results they've got. Again, that GT World press conference, take a look at that, because the devil is always in the detail. There is somewhere, I think towards the end of it, they talk about the media impact of GT World Challenge and Intercontinental GT Challenge and where the reach is, etc., etc. And they use as a barometer some of the other international series. And on that list, there are a whole range of things, including IMSA, including WEC, including ELMS, and including the Asia Le Mans series. Go and have a look where that is in that order. And then come back and tell me they're not doing a good job with the resources they've got. Their resources are tiny compared to many other international series, but yet they consistently outperform. So I think there's an example there of how things can be done with not no cost, but with limited cost, and by keeping a core team kind of ticking over. I know, Jackie Warnock, who works with Jane on the social media side, is just raring to get out of the stalls and get out of Adelaide.
Oh my god, poor girl. She has been chomping at the bit to leave this country.
Just a touch.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, Jackie, if you are listening, we do love you. Just
I'll make sure she does. But here's the thing with it is there are examples out there where you don't have to spend millions to get to millions.
Yeah.
And there, in the Asia Le Mans series, is a great example of someone doing exactly that. Really wise investment about the way in which they've developed that product. And at another time, I'll tell you how the TV deal came together. It's an extraordinary story about where we started and where we now sit.
Yeah. Because it's night and day. Because 4 years ago it was, I think, Chinese only commentary, and I think someone in the chat might remind me. I think one of our members, on a whim, was just like, I guess I'll just provide commentary for the day, because why not? And we had someone in our Discord server just doing commentary because there wasn't any English comms.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you the initial story, but the first year, it was me persuading the TV producer that I could sit in their edit suite, because they weren't doing live. They were just doing a highlights package. And it was me sitting in the edit suite talking to a timing screen. In the following race, we did it with a couple of webcams.
Yep.
And then at Fuji, we did it with him sitting in race control and cycling through the circuit CCTV and putting that to air, and me commentating on that for 4 hours, and we got an audience. And it was getting that audience. And, I've said this, I know, a number of times in conversations we've had on the Reddit group, which is give them the positive feedback, show them you're enjoying it, come along and watch it, be constructively critical, but be realistic about it, and better things will come. And it did. And now what we've got is one hell of a team.
Absolutely. We did actually have a question that you just prompted me there. Mark Clarkson, who I'm sure you've met, was one of the people lucky enough to get a Janetta tour, absolute madhead. He asked, what can we as a sports car community do to help right now? Because, we can't go to races, we can watch, we can comment, we can engage, we can buy merch. What beyond that can we do to help this time period?
Be positive, be engaged, be constructive, keep the positivity up on social media in particular. That is watched absolutely is watched. Keep watching, I think, is the other thing. Remember that most of the races we're sad we can't go to, we probably couldn't go to in the first place.
Yeah.
But just be as you are, this engaged, positive community of people that have got a common will for this all to succeed. In terms of positive feedback, let's wait and see what can emerge from what comes next in terms of the management structure at ACO. And by the way, the answer to that question is I have no idea. I have an idea what might happen.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of the scope, prepare to be underwhelmed in terms of what comes next. I don't mean that in terms of the output. I mean in terms of the solution making. I don't think you're going to see many big names coming in, and there's lots of good reasons for that. But be prepared that it's not going to be all that exciting in terms of the solution to the fact that Gerard Neveu is now left.
Yeah.
But will there be an opportunity for people to feed in? I hope so. I've got some ideas on that front, which I'm given half an opportunity going to be putting forward. And that would involve input from engaged individuals and groups. And that's going to be about, with a finite resource, where do you spend it?
Yeah.
What do you do? It's all very well we could take another container full of set and kit and caboodle, but it all costs money. What can we do with the money we've already got to make the audience happier and, more to the point, bigger? And we all know there's one or two easy answers to some of that, but even easy answers come with a price tag. I mean, one of the ones I'm sure it's on there, and on that list is charging for the app. Yes. Absolutely. I believe, and most others do, that there should be open source for people to actually watch this. The difference between us and them is I don't know what the figures are.
Yeah.
I genuinely don't know how much money they make from that, and whether or not that is a defining point in whether or not they can offer that service. I don't know.
I'll tell a quick story here. I understand that they might use that app to fund the broadcast, whether that be in terms of getting the talent or or the cameras or the personnel or the graphics, etc., etc., etc. And I think that does set it apart from other broadcasts in a similar vein. But I got into the WEC by stealing the broadcast. I did not pay for it in the first year that I had it. I was lucky enough to get shown how to backdoor my way into the stream, and for the first year of my enjoyment of the WEC, I was stealing the broadcast. And I don't know if that's going to put me on some blacklist or something, but
hang on a minute. Get the helicopter on the way now. It's Adelaide. It's 223 Adelaide Street, Adelaide, Australia.
Oh no. But yeah, so like that means that, my experience as a fan, what has happened since then, my experience with the Discord community and the WEC subreddit, that all would not have happened. And I'm sure that, I don't want to sound, like I'm overreaching here, but that would mean that, that experience has then changed for other people who I may have influenced in that.
I think the answer is, obviously I'm shocked, stunned and amazed that was your introduction to it. But I would hope that coming out the other side of this extraordinary 2020 adventure, that some fundamental questions will be asked and answered about solutions to how it's sustained moving forward. I hope that gives opportunity for a bit of constructive thought, and I hope that a range of people are going to be involved in that decision-making process and that feedback process. So the answer is stay positive, stay engaged, keep asking the questions, and let's work towards finding opportunities to make a more positive input about a better solution moving forward. That's what I hope for. Is a straight answer.
Beautiful.
I think there are big potential wins by making the right decisions moving forward, but to get to that point, they've got to be a bit more relaxed about us understanding where the business case is in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that might be my next step.
Fair enough.
Is to actually ask that question, which is, tell me what the business case is, and then can I help you to help you?
Yeah. Help me to help you.
Might be another part of it.
Help
yes,
me to
absolutely.
Help you. Yeah.
I mean, I am genuinely, literally invested in that marketplace.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, everything I do
intimately
depends
invested.
on that market. Absolutely. There's nothing to do with, nothing about all the business interests I have in the sport that don't do well if they do well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think what they've got to be persuaded of is the altruism of that approach. I'm not going and knocking on the door and saying, come and pay me 100,000 euros to give you the answers to the questions you already knew. It's, can I help informally to bring to you some questions that you might want to ask of the people that are giving you the solutions you've currently got?
Yeah. Brilliant. That's consultancy, right? That's consultancy in a nutshell.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, at this stage, with that kind of area, I don't even want to be paid for that. It'd be nice if I did. But ultimately, if I can bring something forward that helps this to be more sustainable, why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. That it's what benefits for everyone. Okay, 2 things before we finish up, because we're hitting 2.5 hours, and this is going to be a long one.
It's a bit like Twisk.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say. So, first thing, in 2 sentences, you only get 2 sentences.
Okay.
What kernel of positivity can you offer us for 2021? What is something that you might have in your back pocket that you can say, that you can let us know that is going to get us excited about 2021, considering that we're here a month out from the end of what for some people will be the worst year of their lives?
Okay. Of the series that I'm most engaged with, so the Asian Le Mans series, the European Le Mans series, and the FIAWEC plus IMSA, I expect full grids for all of them.
Awesome. That is awesome. That is a great kernel of positivity. I love that. Secondly, just before we finish off, can I talk to Marshall about doing a Who the Hell Are You? I'd love to do that.
I've never done a Who the Hell Are You?
How have you not done one?
I've no idea, but it's I think with MP, his work ethic is staggering, and he and Chaparral emerged from, I just can't imagine what the last year or two has been like. He closes in on 1,000 podcasts.
We mentioned that right at the very top of the show.
We did. There's a lot.
How long has he been doing that? How long has he been doing the podcast?
2016.
Wow, so that's the same amount of time that we've been doing the podcast. We've just capped off 120 episodes, and he's at 1,000. That is...
And I can tell you he's probably got 100 or so in the bank. So I can tell you there's 1, 2, 3. I can think of 4 that I've given to him we've not yet seen. Okay.
Wow.
So a good example of it is, if you've not heard the Peugeot podcast from Sebring 2 years ago. So this was Super Sebring.
Yeah.
Where he sat down with Pedro Lamy and Davidson and Sebastian Bourdais, and there is a part 2 yet to be published, which includes, I think it's Bourdais and Pagenaud. That is an awesome podcast. It's an awesome podcast. Yeah. I mean, for instance, it was the guys talking for the first time about Nick Manassian's accident at Paul Ricard, where if you don't know Paul Ricard, it's difficult to explain how extraordinary this is, but the car ended up on the runway of the airport next door. That's a long... Have a look on Google Maps. Have a look on Google Maps. That's an extraordinary thing. Anyway, and an hilarious story about what happened when they started the engine up for the first time with the 908 at its very first test at Ricard, which included Gerard Neveu, who was then the general manager of the circuit. I'm not going to ruin it for you.
Okay.
It's one of the best motorsport podcasts I've heard. The best motorsport podcast I've heard, by the way. And I say this to everybody. I said it to a guy in Bahrain just this weekend, is Dinner with Racers Level 5 special. If you've not heard that,
Yes.
it's the best racing podcast ever.
Yes, besides this one, of course.
Besides this one. But Marshall's Peugeot podcast, he's got a lot that are in the locker, including some really cool in-car stuff, including the one that broke my digital recorder into three. That was an in-car recording of a Ferrari 458 GTE at Monza. And the vibration in that car literally shattered my quite expensive digital recorder into three separate pieces. Mercifully, it didn't stop recording.
That is amazing.
So he's got a lot of that kind of ambient stuff as well as other stuff that will still come forward. And you'll see that beginning to eke out as Marshall gets into a little bit more recovery mode.
Christmas mode?
He's been... Yeah, well, he's also been been very honest about, because of where his wife's health condition has been, the isolation at the moment because her immune system with the treatment is shot.
Yeah.
Which means that they've actually had to isolate for years now, into years now. But he's no less motivated. The podcast, it's a joyful thing. I love doing it, and through the months where it's been not all that positive, it's been a real positive for us to do it. We carry on doing that. We have got one we've already recorded from 2 days ago. There's some cool stuff in that about stuff that's kicking around. There's a bit of a response to a couple of news stories from elsewhere from me where I've been equally blunt there as I've just been now. Love it. We'll carry on doing it. Keep going in, but do listen to that Peugeot 9081 because it's a cracker.
Okay. I think you've given you enough time to promote your other podcast and this podcast. And as we hit 2 hours and 30 minutes, I want to say thank you very much, Graham. Thank you for giving me some of your time tonight. I know we just kind of threw this together on a whim, basically, a few days ago. So thank you for doing that. We didn't get through everything on my list because, of course, we didn't, because that was never going to happen. But yeah, it's been a wonderful experience getting to chat with you again, to see you in person. The first time since Le Mans, actually. And I hope the next week of travel for you goes very safely.
Well, fingers crossed for me, to you and to all your community. You're an awesome, positive part of this. I've loved engaging with your guys. The level of positivity matches, how can I put this, compares very well to other alternatives that might be actually out there. Stick with it. Keep your heads up. Stay positive. Have a great Christmas with friends and family if you possibly can make it. And hopefully there's this one again in the new year, maybe from Abu Dhabi. That'd be quite cool. We'll get Cyril in as well and do that. That'd be cool.
Hey, don't make promises, Graham. Don't.
Here's the thing: we've got a week in between the races.
We could do an AMA. You've done an AMA. We could do that.
I will speak to Jane now. Okay. And I think we're putting together a program for the teams and the drivers for the week in between, and this goes on the program.
Fantastic.
Simple as that.
Thank you very much, Graham.
Great stuff.
And thank you for everyone who's joined on in our chat room. Thank you, everyone who will eventually listen or watch this. Yeah, thank you very much. I've been Michael Olivari. Peace out. There we go.
Nice one, mate. All good?